mentor's work had nothing to do with war, so he resolved to live a quiet life, but that lasted only until one day. He thought about his quiet, peaceful life as he swung his hastily made weapons at a huge orc that was preparing to attack and bursting into an angry scream. I remembered two human silhouettes, a woman and a man, asking you to forgive them because they could not take him with them on their journey. The couple walked away, leaving a long shadow behind, saying their profession would not help them in battle anymore, and the man said goodbye to Ryu and asked him to stay and keep caring for the animals. He holds out his hand, asks why they did this, and pleads with them to stop and wait because he can fight too. He wakes suddenly in bed with his arm outstretched. The sun was shining into the room, its rays already keeping him awake. Those memories were only a dream. Ryu's house sits among the mountains and hills. His farm has many animals, and he cares for them well. A man went outside to feed the animals. The cow he had just fed with fresh mown grass began to nuzzle him. Delighted, he stroked the animals' chins. Then a girl called out to Ryu. Holding her cat in her arms, a girl slowly approaches the man and sincerely thanks him, saying Ryu helped her cat finally recover. When the girl arrived, the man stroked the animals' heads and is glad her pet has finally recovered. The girl notices that, although he is a mentor by profession, he can still treat animals, and he smiles cheerfully in agreement, but he is actually at a loss because he never really wanted to be a mentor. The church decides people's professions. Being a mentor makes it much easier to befriend animals. Two of his childhood friends, though, were assigned the roles of a young hero and a wizard. Determined to become a true hero, the girl began studying the knight's path and training harder. A magician is a support role, and the person who held it trained in magic at the church, and when we all grew up, two friends and I went on a trip. Remembering this, Ryu thinks he has made little progress compared to his friends, and a girl carrying a cat distracts him again. She is upset that he was lost in thought and did not listen to her. Rousing himself, he apologized to the girl. Yes, he asks the guest what they had stopped talking about. The girl reminds you that people in the city are saying his friend should return to the city soon. A man yawns softly, feels a little tired and decides it's time for a break, then stands among the trees and stretches, lifting his arms higher. A breeze ruffled his obedient hair. Ryu hadn't expected friends to return like this after such a dream. Ryu realized they'd always been together, but now he was alone, so he used his profession to befriend many dogs, cats, and newscripts, played with them often, and took care of them. The man rests his hand on his head and imagines he could tame Fenrir so he could follow and stay close to his friends, but that dream is impossible to pull off. A sudden growl from the bushes behind him snaps him out of his daydream. He wonders what made the sound. Ryu, sure no one should be in the forest, parts the bushes with his hands and calls out to see if anyone is there. The man's eyes widen in surprise. Immediately, the smooth fur of an animal catches his attention. A wolf stood in the bushes. The wolf's eyes were fixed directly on the man. Mesmerized, Ryu couldn't take his eyes off the beautiful animal and was amazed at how incredible the wolf was, but he still could not believe his eyes when he noticed the wolf's hind leg had fallen into a trap. Sharp iron spikes dug painfully into the wolf's hind leg. Ryu quickly moved closer and told the wolf to stay still because he could help it now. The wolf didn't welcome the help and started growling at Ryu. When Ryu reached out, the wolf bit down hard on his hand. Ryu let the man try to pull his hand free from the wolf's grip and told him to calm down while he held the fierce wolf by the scruff as it struggled, then managed to remove the trap from its hind leg. The wolf watches the man with interest as Ryu asks it to wait while he searches his bag for potions, and the wolf stays patient as he rummages. The man pours a potion on the animal's hind leg and says he will be all right and will be able to run freely and confidently. The man gets up to leave because it's time to get back to work. Ryu barely turns around and the animal is already gone. He grins and goes home. The night was dark, with no lanterns or artificial lights to cut through it, and nature was lit only by the stars and the moon reflecting the sun. Ryu couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, he wondered if the wolf had found its place and rejoined the pack, and he took comfort that he had been there at that moment to help it. Yawning softly, he covers his mouth with his hand and decides it's time for bed since it's late and he needs enough sleep. A wolf's paw suddenly enters the room. The wolf appears above the man's head, opens its mouth to greet him joyfully, and says that tonight is very beautiful. Ryu turns around, frightened, and stares at the animal, repeating his last words as the other man recognizes it as the wolf he saved that afternoon, and Ryu realizes the animal can speak. Sitting on his bed, he thinks it might not be a wolf but some kind of monster because it can understand human speech and even talk. As the man tried to figure out what was happening, the monster paced the room and said it had a question for him, and the man called back that he would answer if he could. Surprised, the wolf tells Ryu he is very honest. Ryu looks away and agrees with the wolf. If anything goes wrong, the animal's sharp teeth would quickly defeat him. Tilting its head to the side, the animal watches as the wolf asks him to explain why Ryu decided to help anyway, so he also spent his potion, and the man is at a loss, thinking how to respond to the animal. After all, he can't claim he just wanted to help, since no one will believe such nonsense, and if he lies, he can make ends meet in no time. Suddenly, the wolf told the man to answer immediately, since she wasn't patient enough to wait for Ryu to collect all her thoughts in a pile. The man steeled himself and, embarrassed, said he helped the wolf because he thinks she is very beautiful. Taken aback, the wolf had not expected that answer, and the man said he would not want such a beautiful wolf to disappear just like that. The wolf laughed loudly. She finally understood why the man had acted that way. He wanted her to live a long life, so he freed her from the trap. Covering her nose with her paw, she says the guy is still very interesting. She says she was only playing with those things a little when he decided to help her. Exhaling, he looks away, realizing she did not need any help at that moment. Turning back to Ryu with genuine interest, the wolf says she likes him and asks his name. Ryu hesitates, and she tells him not to be afraid, so he gives his name. The wolf repeats the man's unusual name, notices how uncommon it is, declares him hers from that moment, and refuses to accept his objection. At first, the man didn't understand the wolf's hint and thought he had misheard her, but then the wolf said he had heard everything correctly. Claiming ownership, she said that from now on Ryu would be her pet, and the man, taken aback, pointed to himself to confirm she meant him. The wolf suddenly grew so large it burst through the ceiling with its head. Splinters of wood flew across the room. She urged Ryu to come with her. It carried the man in its jaws. A man believes the wolf can both speak and grow larger, and that it is a Fenrir. When Ryu asks her about it, she responds, surprised that he noticed. He asked them to wait until she had enough so he could take at least one bag. After a while, they found themselves in the forest. The Fenrir girl says they are already in place and throws him to the ground. Racing through the forest on all their legs, actually their paws, Ryu felt an unimaginable horror because he had to ride the whole time in an animal's mouth. A man looks up and sees the tree crowns covering the entire sky. Bright sunlight fills his eyes as he takes in this unusual place for the first time. The man was in a small pit beside a hill where a Fenrir stood, and the same figures ringed the hill, watching him with interest. On the hill, a man watched Fenrir and Ryu approach, surprised when a pack of Fenrir appeared before him. About 20 to 30 Fenrir were in the pack, the one in the middle much bigger than the others, and the man thinks it is their likely leader. Ryu is terrified from head to toe, very afraid, and not sure he will ever get out of this forest alive. Without warning, Fenrir, the so-called leader, turns to his daughter and asks what kind of person she brought into their home. Ryu realizes the wolf that carried him in her jaws is the pack leader's daughter. The wolf explains she liked him and brought him here. Angry, the father swears and tells his daughter this is no reason to drag someone into their pack and the forest. The leader speaks rudely to the main character and asks how he knows her daughter. The man says he works on a ranch. The leader repeats his question. Ryu explains the leader's daughter fell into a trap and he only rescued her. The Fenrir leader said they could easily destroy any trap, and Ryu said he only later discovered his daughter was just playing with them. The leader is clearly unhappy that she has taken a task again. The daughter tells her father that the person she brought is a mentor. Ryu might be able to help their grandfather. The wolf turns to the man again and asks if the information is true, while the pack leader looks away and says their grandfather lived a long life and it is unlikely anyone can help him with the problem. Now the daughter tells Ryu in a low whisper that her grandfather's health has worsened due to a loss of magical power, and she partly blames herself. The man doesn't fully understand, but believes one of their loved ones isn't leaving at all, and they brought him here only because he can help in some way. Seeing this, the man turns back to the leader. Ryu tells the leader not to swear so much at his child. Ryu asks to be allowed to meet his grandfather. Since it's already running out, the Fenrir certainly have nothing to lose. Suddenly, the leader snaps at the man and, with contempt, sternly orders him to close his mouth. The man turns to the leader and says he was brought here to help their kinsmen. Ryu said he was powerless if the problem was age, but would probably be able to help if it was something else. The leader's daughter looked at the man in surprise. The leader looks down at the man and grants his request, allowing him to enter the elder, but saying it will still be a waste of invaluable time and effort. They arrive at the place where the tree's roots split and find a couch between them where a very old representative of the Fenrir rests. His granddaughter greets him and calls him her elder. Old Fenrir lifts his heavy eyelids and, voice barely audible, asks why the man is there as the girl starts to explain, but the man interrupts her with the same hand gesture. Ryu offers my hand to the elder. The man says he is very pleased to meet you. Ryu says the elder's granddaughter brought him here. He works as a mentor and is here to help cure Fenrir's disease. The Fenrir elder looks at the man in disbelief and explains his role, unsure the man can help. Ryu insists it can be done, but he will not do it for free just because someone said so, and the nearby Fenrir were stunned, covering their mouths in shock and indignation. Voices from the side immediately barked at the man, saying an ordinary person has no right to treat their leader like that, and some even thought he was trying to trick the Fenrir. The elder stepped closer to the boy and asked if the man could really help him, and the man agreed and studied him again with a searching stare without looking away. Fenrir agreed and told the man he was hoping he would do well. Ryu puts a hand to his chest and says the case will end quickly. In return, Roop asks Henry for a favor, saying he wants to become stronger. The elder asks why he needs that power. Roop explains he is like the elder's granddaughter. The man explains that the girl relied on him because she could not cure her grandfather, and since she could not imagine another way, she turned to him. He no longer wants to let his loved ones down, and now he remembers the two friends who left him and the hand he had stretched out to them. The Fenrir girl looked surprised at the man's words. The elder said he accepted the terms and asked who the man was and what he should do. The man says it's all simple and starts taking off his glove. The upper part of your arm is closer to Fenrir. He asked me to bite him and drink his blood. The leader dismissed it as complete nonsense and said he did not think the blood of a common man could do anything. Despite the crowd's complaints, the elder agreed and bit the man's hand. A huge cloud of dust and a bright glow surrounded the two, forcing the other Fenrir to hold onto the ground so they would not be blown away. The elder's expression changed and the boy held on with all his strength. The elder let go of the boy's hand. Ryu holds her in front of him. Ryu hadn't expected it to hurt so much. The girl is curious about what the boy did. She still doesn't know where the mentor got so much magic and is curious about it. The man understands what she is thinking. She believes Ryu has more magic power than the hero, and Ryu shows why by wrapping his arm in a bandage. Ryu has too much magical energy inside him, and if it isn't released, it could explode. The girl warns the man he is using too much force, and that if it does not fall out, it will be bad. Ryu says strength usually grows with training, but he was born with immense power that keeps increasing as he gets older, making him a real treasure. The girl is distracted by her elder and looks to her grandfather. Strength overwhelms him. The Fenrir elder waved his tail enthusiastically. He no longer looked like himself. Others notice he already feels better. The granddaughter moves close to her grandfather and gently caresses him with her crown, while the elder recalls the deal with the man and asks him to start training with his pack before he gains the power. Startled, he asks if he can really practice in the Fenrir forest, and an angry growl from behind tells him he cannot because a person cannot be part of a pack. The elder sincerely thanks the man for his help, but from outside, other Fenrirs still complain that he is weak, dangerous to trust, and generally ignorant. Someone suggested getting rid of the guy. The elder, in a menacing voice, ordered all Fenrir to be quiet and viciously asked whether his relatives really intended to deal with his savior. Suddenly, everyone lowered their heads, pressed their ears to the backs of their heads, and began to whine plaintively. Ryu felt a terrible pressure and couldn't understand why he was so scared, since the pressure wasn't even directed at the guy. Ryu leans close to the girl and asks who her grandfather really is. The girl says he is the very first Fenrir, the ancestor of all Fenrir. When the elder asks what he wants to do first, the young man says he wants to start by learning to control his magical energy better. The elder knows this will demand strength. In the forest, the man must change his very nature. He will grow stronger and learn to master his power. He takes the leader's words to mean he has to face his inner self, but he's not sure he can be with his friends again. He steels himself and says he will rely on the elder, and both close their eyes and nod in approval. Suddenly he holds something in his mouth and hands it to the man, who has a large fang protruding from his arm. The elder proudly declares this is his fang, and the man can hardly believe his eyes because the treasure in his hands is the true fang of the Fenrir elder. The elder says the trophy will help Ryu control his magic. A Fenrir girl quickly joins Ryu and offers to watch over him during training. Ryu firmly grips the fang in her hands and asks others to wait for his friends, saying he will catch up with them and wants to become stronger to do it. Ryu dodges a quick attack while training hard with the evil orcs in the Fenrir forest. The evil orc charges Ryu angrily, drool spraying from its wide-open mouth in all directions, and Ryu meets the attack with a confident, determined look because he has been training for about a month. Ryu feels great when the goblin leaps onto the man and swings his club. Orc attacks are slow and easy to dodge, and Ryu, aware of this, avoids the monster's heavy strike. Ryu suddenly swings and severs the orc's arm. The monster emits a wrenching, ear-piercing scream. Then the blow lands on its legs. Ryu believes that when a monster loses its balance, its head can be safely removed. The man wipes sweat from his forehead, pleased with a job well done, then turns and asks about the situation with Fenrir's girlfriend. Sitting on a pile of orcs, the creature yawned softly while waiting for Ryu to finish with the monster, and noted he had been dealing with an orc for a very long time. The man wonders how Fenrir managed to handle so many orcs. Fenrir are really impressive. Fenrir and Ryu paused among the trees and lit a small fire to roast juicy, delicious meat. Ryu knows orcs are the weakest monsters, yet he can already handle them, and Fenrir supports him, saying he seems stronger now. On the first day he only ran away. Ryu didn't deny it. Even after a month of training, he says he can barely handle such a monster. Ryu built his stamina by repeatedly running from a pack of Fenrir that kept catching him, learned to survive in the forest, and the Fenrir girl stayed by his side, joining the training. To build immunity, eat poisonous berries repeatedly, because becoming stronger requires adapting to very different conditions. Ryu studies the fang the Elder gave him and realizes he achieved those results because it's big enough to be used as a knife. The Fenrir girl lifted her chin with pride and agreed with the man, saying her grandfather is incredible. Ryu is pleased the Elder's granddaughter is personally looking out for him. Downcast, the Fenrir girl lowers her head and pins her ears back, upset that she still has no name of her own. A monster's name is part of its soul, so naming a monster requires enormous magical power. Attempting to name his granddaughter, the Elder exhausted all his mana. The man patted Fenrir on the head and told her not to be upset. Ryu says with a bright smile that the Elder will definitely give his granddaughter a name, and she just needs to wait. The man says he can't bear to look at her sad face. The Fenrir girl looked at Ryu with hope in her eyes. Suddenly one of the Fenrir jumped out of the bush and called to his mistress, the Elder's granddaughter. She asked what had happened, and he said he had a message from the head. Fenrir suddenly turned to Ryu and wrinkled his nose in clear contempt. The Elder has news about the young man's training, so he must hurry to hear the leader. Ryu realizes the whole pack is treating him very coldly. An Elder stands by a tree waiting for the man. Ryu calls out to the old Fenrir and greets him. The leader says the man is fast. The man says he was clearly told to hurry so he could listen closely to the Elder, and he smiled and asked them not to pay attention to his colleagues. The Elder says many of the Fenrir consider Ryu's training useless, and a man didn't fully understand what the Fenrir meant, so he asked about it. The Elder looks serious and says he has prepared a test for Ryu, who must pass it and prove his strength to join the Fenrir pack. At first the man froze under the Elder's onslaught, but after a moment, he looked resolute and confidently asked what he needed to do to join the pack. The Elder speaks gravely. Fenrir tells Ryu he must defeat the demonic rooster as a test and must do it alone. The demonic rooster is a B-rank monster that even a full party can barely defeat, and fighting it alone is suicidal. Suddenly, the Elder's granddaughter steps out from behind the man and asks her grandfather if she can help you with the task. The Elder says the whole point of the test is that Ryu must defeat the monster on his own, so no one can help him. The Elder notices Ryu has not yet tapped the full power of Fenrir's fang. The guy looked at his trophy, surprised. Fenrir says fangs can destroy anything in their path, even magic, and Ryu has the Elder Fenrir's fang and will help the man if he asks. Smiling, the Elder says that with an object like that, the demonic cock poses no danger to the man. Ryu scratches the back of his head with his hand and doesn't really understand what Fenrir is saying. The Elder tells him it's okay that he doesn't understand yet. His trial begins at sunset, and he needs a good rest until then. As the sun sets behind the mountain, the bright rays on the treetops start to fade, and the monster's foot suddenly steps onto the ground. The Elder's granddaughter and Ryu cautiously peer from behind a bush and watch the monster. The demonic rooster is huge, mostly looks like a rooster but has a large snake instead of a tail, and is hunting a harmless animal. Suddenly it blinded everything nearby with light from its eyes. The animal trying to escape the monster squeaked one last time as its body suddenly petrified from the hind legs upward. The demonic rooster mercilessly trampled the animal's sculpture, leaving only a pile of stones and dust, and Ryu, watching the scene, realizes the situation is not good right now. This monster can turn a man to stone with a single look. Its sight and rooster-like tail are poisonous. Its only advantage is a narrow field of view and that it cannot take off. The Elder's granddaughter asks the man if he's okay, but Ryu refuses and says he has no other choice. He stepped boldly over the bushes and headed toward the enemy. Fenrir's granddaughter wished him luck and asked him to be more careful. A man hid behind a tree so the monster would not notice him and armed himself with the fang of the Fenrir elder. Ryu knows attacking the demonic rooster head-on would be foolish, so he must first deal with the snake on its tail. The man sprang forward, and while the snake looked away, prepared to strike. The snake barely noticed the man before he took it out with a single blow. Ryu is really happy he managed to defeat part of the monster. Ryu wasted no time and sprinted to the monster's paws. You must attack them to immobilize the monster quickly. The demonic rooster screams and suddenly bats Ryu away with its paw, and Ryu realizes this will not be so simple. The rooster tilts his head from side to side. He seems to have lost sight of Ryu. The man begins to suspect he is in the monster's blind spot. A man bursts out of the bush and has already swung to deliver the attack, while the rooster slips away from its opponent. Looking up, Ryu realized the demonic rooster could fly, and it soared into the sky, spreading its huge wings. No one expected this, because he was certain the demonic rooster could not fly, and now he realizes he is in the monster's palm. The rooster's wings keep spreading wider. The man will wait until the rooster goes down. Ryu doesn't even finish the thought before the demonic rooster snaps its wings shut, unleashing a blast of wind so powerful it hurls him back along with pieces of trees. The elder's granddaughter eagerly asks the man if he is okay, and Ryu rises carefully, saying he is fine. The wind was clearly dangerous, able to cut trees into perfectly even pieces, and Ryu begins to suspect the demonic rooster used magic. Facing a difficult situation, Ryu doesn't know what to do. The rooster won't come down. Ryu realizes long-range magic would help. Ryu studies the fang, puzzled, and thinks it might hold something that could bring him closer to victory. Then he remembers magic. Ryu remembers the elder's warning that Fenrir fangs can destroy anything in their path, even magic, and the man has the Fenrir elder's fang in his hands. This trophy will help him if he wants it. Carefully, he recalls every detail of the demonic cock's aerial attack. Again, the monster spreads its wings wide to launch another attack, and Ryu quickly jumps directly in front of it and dodges the attacks. Ryu knows that if he does nothing, he will only make ends meet. He has no other choice, and he thinks he must try something out. He braces himself stubbornly and thrusts a Fenrir fang forward. A light appears around him. The elder's granddaughter notices his mana has increased. Ryu concentrates on her magic and calls for magical power to flow through the fang and for mana to gather at the tip of the fang, while the demonic rooster keeps attacking without pause. The mana had reached its limit, so it was time to release it, and Ryu swung his fang, sending a rapid shock wave much like the monster's attacks. A single strike hit the demonic rooster while it was still in the air, defeating it and sending parts of its body crashing to the ground. The man could hardly believe he'd won. His eyes were fixed on the monster's remains. The elder's granddaughter stepped out of the bushes and congratulated him on his victory. She was genuinely glad he had passed the test. Ryu tried to back Fenrir's words, but collapsed to the ground. Fenrir immediately worried that something had happened to Ryu. The man had no strength left to stay on his feet. Ryu apologizes for how she was received at Fenrir's and asks the elder's granddaughter to let her rest. The elder's granddaughter is surprised that Ryu chose to rest here, but she does not object and agrees. The man could no longer speak. He thinks he can now rest in peace and then speak with the elder. A woman's hand suddenly touches his head. Her eyelids were already closing, but a faint girl's silhouette showed through, and Ryu wondered who she could be because he was the only person. My thoughts no longer had a place in my head, and my eyelids grew heavy. The man was so sleepy that after a moment he fell asleep. The girl sitting next to you let her rest, while a nearby elder watched the painting and praised the man because he could now safely join their pack. After they defeated the demonic rooster, many Fenrir began spending more time with him. Younger children often asked Ryu to play with them, and adults invited them to hunt and brought all kinds of food. Ryu stretches his arms forward and asks the Fenrir to wait a moment. The elder's granddaughter appears behind him and notices Ryu is now very popular with the Fenrir. He says the pack won't leave him alone now. The elder's granddaughter doesn't see that as bad because he passed the test and earned the pack's respect. The man sees this as an ideal alignment of events. Some people still do not like the new pack member. A pack leader stood behind the tree, angrily watching for you. His wife suddenly pins the pack leader. Her heavy paw rests on Fenrir's head. She scolds him for setting a bad example for their children. Ryu watches the painting, relieved that Mother Wolf is nearby, and tells the elder's granddaughter that her mother is quite ruthless, while the granddaughter replies that her mother holds a higher position in the pack. Her higher position comes from Mom, being the Fenrir elder's daughter. Ryu looks at his torn sleeve and realizes his clothes are completely worn out. so he needs to go to the city to buy new ones. The Fenrir girl asks why Ryu didn't turn the monster's skins he extracted into clothes, and Ryu says he doesn't have the sewing skills. Since you need money for new clothes, you'll have to go to the city anyway, and the elder's granddaughter suggested asking her grandfather about it. Ryu agrees and approaches the elder. The leader, the father of the elder's granddaughter, appears in their path. The leader firmly forbids Ryu from going into the city. The leader thinks the man will reveal their lair, and tells the elder not to even think about letting him go anywhere, and the mother notices and is unhappy that her husband has returned to his old ways. Ryu understands the leader is right, since anyone who learns the pack's location would be in serious danger. You ask the elder if there was no other way to get out into the city. The granddaughter says you should send someone with the man. The elder agrees with his granddaughter and says this way will be safe. Suddenly, a Fenrir grandmother turns to her husband and asks whether the pack has any suitable candidates. The girl is happy to see her grandmother. The elder's wife turns to him and asks if he trusts the man so little. The elder agrees with the Fenrir grandmother's opinion. Turning to Ryu, the elder offers to introduce him to a dwarf. Dwarves are highly skilled and very strong, and with the right materials they can sew close. The elder knows a dwarf in the kingdom. If Ryu tells the dwarf he is from the Fenrir elder, the dwarf will help him. Ryu smiles and thanks the elder. The Fenrir leader objected to the elder because Ryu would meet many people on the way to the city, and the elder smiled and said he would send his daughter with Ryu, which clearly surprised everyone. The elder knows it's time for his granddaughter to see the wider world, and he trusts you and doesn't mind his partner. Blushing, the Fenrir girl turned away from Ryu. Her father, the leader, forbade her from going out into the world, especially with Ryu. For acting like a friend, he was slapped on the chin by his wife. The mother asks what the problem is, since Ryu treats her daughter well. Grandma sat on the sidelines and held her tongue. Ryu paused briefly to consider how much the Fenrir liked him. The elder pauses to check things before leaving, planning to teach the man some magic and earn money by selling the extracted materials. At first Ryu was worried, but now he is happy and curious about what awaits them on their journey. Grandma Fenrir asks Ryu whether he remembered everything and took it with him, and Ryu agrees while the mother nearby keeps soothing her husband, the Fenrir leader. The elder taught him much about the materials and the vault's magic. Now he must travel to the land of the dwarves. Ryu turns and asks where his companion is, and Fenrir's grandmother tells him to wait a moment, promising he will be very surprised. An elder steps forward and thanks the man for waiting. Beside him stands a slim, pretty girl with wolf ears. She looks at Ryu, embarrassed and waiting for his reaction. Stunned, he immediately noticed the girl's beauty and wondered where she had come from. She covered her mouth with her hand, pressed her ears to the back of her head, and asked for his impression of her. At first, Ryu doesn't understand how the girl knows him or why her voice sounds so familiar. Ryu guesses who it is, and the girl clasps her grandmother's paw, thrilled that she succeeded while her grandmother praises her because no one recognizes her among people now. After the fight with the demonic rooster, Ryu remembers seeing a girl. He thinks it was her. She says she has been training for a long time. Her wish to travel with Ryu explained everything. She had not been able to keep up that appearance before, but with her mother and grandmother's advice she managed. An elder suddenly appears beside Ryu and asks him to give his granddaughter a name, leaving him shocked. Ryu asks the elder if he wants the man to sign a contract with his granddaughter. The elder agrees and says the man can do it. The guy has to give the girl a name and sign a familiar contract with her, which gives perks like telepathy, so it's actually a pretty good deal for him. Grandma Fenrir reassures Ryu that he has no reason to worry. Her granddaughter wants it too. Grandmother says her granddaughter owes the man money, so she asks him to give her a name and adds that, after being with her granddaughter a long time, she can safely trust him. My granddaughter doesn't mind either. The Fenrir girl bowed her head and waited calmly for his answer. The man agrees to sign a contract with Fenrir, and Grandma asks for a round and thanks him for agreeing. Ryu watches the girl standing directly in front of him as she returns his gaze. The eagle suggests they start. The girl agrees, and Ryu reaches out his palm to her forehead. The man decides he must offer a contract now, and she accepts it. After that, you must give the familiar a new name. Light streams from the man's hand, revealing every feature of the girl's face. As the magic concentrates between them, the man says the name Lear, opens his eyes and declares he is finished, while the woman looks away and repeats her new name. Ryu worried she would not like the name Lear, even though he felt it suited her well. Smiling and closing her eyes in pleasure, the girl says she likes her name and thanks the guy. Relief washes over him as a smile spreads across his face. Grandfather Fenrir steps in from the side. The pack elder asks if everything went well. The man agrees. Then Lear takes Rue's hand and asks him to start the journey. She leads him and says goodbye to her grandfather, grandmother, and mother. In the distance, her father tried to comfort himself because his daughter did not say goodbye to him. They set off traveling together. Lear saw many beautiful landscapes, was amazed by the mountain views and the barbecue prepared for her, and must have found it very pleasant to fall asleep on the man's shoulder while they sat around the campfire. The girl turns to the man and asks about the dwarf country, and he explains it's a settlement near the mines where many skilled craftsmen make excellent armor and weapons. After giving all the information and explanations about armor and weapons, the man says they will be there soon. A guy friend turns to Lear and asks if the girl seems too close, noting that she has wrapped her hands around his arm and is pressed close to him. Ryu remembers that Lear did not stay close to him in the forest. The girl explains she could not do that in front of all her relatives. She admits she has long wanted to flirt with a guy like this. Ryo looks at the girl thoughtfully and after a couple of minutes pats her on the head, thinking who could have spoiled her so much. The man steps onto unfamiliar ground. A massive wall loomed before him and Lear. Lear reached an extraordinary height. They reached the spot. She stepped forward and urged you to hurry. A man called to her and told her to wait. He wants her to become a wolf. Lear wants to know why the man needed that setup. Ryu shows her a card and explains that the girl does not have it. Show your card to everyone at the entrance. In human form, the liar stands out. In wolf form, she is treated as a familiar and no card is required. The girl quickly turned into Fenrir. Clearly, she does not mind taking that appearance again. The man was glad Lear did not object, and they set off again. A man stood behind another person and asked whether it was really a queue to enter the city. Members of the band turn and confirm Rue's words. A blond man with freckles appears. The man asks Rue if this is his first time here. Rue agrees, saying he wants to sell monster materials and buy new clothes in this city, and the man says the city is perfect for Rue because it has many skilled craftsmen. The guards suddenly called a new acquaintance to move on. The man bowed, said farewell, and introduced himself as Mac. Mac turned out to be a merchant, and they might meet Ryu again. Ryu replies, introducing himself and saying he is very pleased to meet you. Then it is the other man's turn. A knight sitting in a small window asks why Ryu has come to the city. Ryu holds out his card and says he only wanted to sell materials to buy new clothes. The knight asks whether he is registered with the Merchant Guild representative. Ryu says he is not registered because he planned to sell to the Adventurers Guild, and the guard understands and asks to inspect the items he brought as a precaution. Ryu agrees and spreads his materials before the guard, who is suddenly surprised and tells him to wait there for a moment. After discussing the product with someone a short distance away, the man returns and thanks you for waiting. Then a man in aristocratic clothes approaches and introduces himself as an employee of the guild. The man looks serious and asks Ryu if he can speak with him. Ryu now sits opposite the man in a stone room with a fireplace. The man asks if he can buy these skins from Ryu. Ryu is taken aback by the request. The man says the materials are high quality and rare in the markets. The man didn't think it was that rare or valuable. Still, he prefers to show them to the master first. Noticing the other's confusion, the man asks if the other will stop him from buying the materials. Ryu is reassured that he did not mean that at all, since he was only on his way to a familiar master. A man asks which master the other is going to, if it's not a secret. Ryu says the master he visited is now called Davar Crown. The guard and the man light up when they hear the name. Silence filled the room. The man could not understand what had happened to them. He had already assumed this was Davar Crown, some kind of criminal. Ryu asked the man if the master was really that famous. The man justified it by saying the master had been recommended by a friend and that Ryu had never seen him personally. With a regretful look, the man repeats the other's words and explains that Davar Crown is the king of this country. Ryu's face changed abruptly from relaxed and serene to shocked. He clearly did not expect to hear the title king used for his master. They are here with Lear, already walking down the road. Suddenly the wolf turns to Ryu and asks him in his mind what they should do next. Ryu is scared because he has completely forgotten that he and Lear can now communicate telepathically. The man replies that he is thinking of meeting the king, but it would be very difficult. First, he suggests that Lear sell the materials. They suddenly head further down the road as the main character thinks about where the guild is, and they meet a friend. It turned out to be Mac, already waving his hand and greeting them. Ryu moved closer to Mac and asked if the kid was really waiting for them. An acquaintance confirmed it, adding that he had begun to worry because the others had been gone so long. Ryu rubs the back of his neck and apologizes to the new acquaintance, explaining that verifying the material took longer than expected. Ryu asks Mac where the guild is. Mac agrees and says he is also interested in the other man's materials, then points out the way to go. They were actually very close and ended up at the same place. Mac explains that guilds must constantly report when tasks are completed, so they decided to build it closer to the entrance. The room was fairly spacious, with a wide counter where employees got task reports. Mac leads the man to the counter. Everything here is split into 3 stages, he says, and Ryu only wants to sell the materials, so he must go to a different stage. The girl behind the counter greets Ryu and politely asks to post the materials the man plans to use to sell the tincture. He agrees and decides it's best to sell materials from weak monsters for now, leaving the excellent quality materials for the king. A man piles all the skins on the table, forming a large mound. The girl suddenly ran off and told the man to wait. Mac, standing behind you, asked in surprise where he got so much material. Everyone nearby was surprised by the sight. The material was quite rare and of high quality, and some guessed the man had just demonstrated the vault's magic. Ryu insisted it was just wild boar skin, but Matt said it wasn't that simple. Mac explains the huge boar is an A-rank monster, and also talks about wild boars. The main character apparently heard this for the first time, since he had lived in the forest and did not know him. Returning to the counter, the girl apologizes for the man's long wait. She says the guild will pay 62 gold coins for these skins. The man says that amount could be enough for a lifetime. Ryu says he will definitely have enough money. She bows and thanks him for the successful deal. At the reception desk, she takes out a bag of money and pushes it toward him. The stacks of coins glittered brightly and looked embarrassing. Max said he'd never seen this much money, and nearby adventurers praised Ryu for pulling off the deal and thought he was impressive, since that kind of money only comes from aristocrats or S-rank adventurers. Ryu realizes that the monsters he defeated were all very powerful. Suddenly, Lear starts a telepathic conversation. She agrees the defeated monsters were very strong and says she's proud he trained in their forest. He calms down and wonders why she's so proud. A man takes a bag of money. Now that they have the money, they can go to the king. Travelers hope they will not run into any problems. A vast road of countless steps led to the king, and when they reached the castle, a massive arch and a columned stone wall greeted them. Seated on his throne, the king watches a guard rush up and say there is a problem and wonders what happened. Geth. The guardian immediately kneels on one knee and says he has very important news. The guardian reports that a man has just appeared in the city wanting to meet the king, appearing to be an ordinary peasant, but carrying skins from A-rank monsters. The guard finds this person very suspicious and asks the king what to do. After a brief silence, the king agreed, ordered the stranger brought to him, and told the guards the man would be useful and must not be allowed to leave. Ryu and Lear stop to rest. A woman comes in, hands him his things, and says she washed everything and sewed up all the holes. He accepts his clothes, thanks the woman sincerely, and apologizes for having to use her shirt. Displeased by his shabby clothes, the woman asks what he was doing and remembers that when he arrived, she thought he was some kind of tramp. Playing it off as a joke, he laughed awkwardly. He can't admit he trains in the forest with Fenrir. Lear asks the guy in his head if they will go to the castle today. He agrees because the guards promised them this yesterday. Yesterday, the guards caught the men at the entrance, and now the whole guild knows they are going to the king. One of them steeled himself and is determined to go. Ryu stands inside the palace before huge carved doors approached by a large arch and a corridor lined with columns. Almost every column has a guard. A guard suddenly says the king is waiting for the man, and Ryu walks across the room, thinking about where the guards are from and why they are here. Ryuji starts to think the king wants to greet them that way. 2 guards open the large doors in front of the man and ask him to be more respectful. A door stands open before you, bright rays pouring out, and a man finds himself before the king, who sits on a throne set atop several steps to emphasize his status. The king looked at the man, and Ryu, who had learned to sense power from fighting strong monsters, realized the dwarf was very strong and could be compared to monsters of the highest rank. Remembering to be more modest, the man kneels to greet the king, and Ryu introduces himself as a mentor. The king says his people reported the man had arrived in the city to sell supplies and buy clothes. The man agrees and points to his product. He tries to continue, but the king interrupts and demands an answer. With a stern look, the king asks whether he stole the leather. The man was taken aback by the question. He refuses, saying he got the skin while hunting. Ryu thinks over what went wrong that made the king suspect him of theft. The king thought for a while. Looking closer, he says even from here he can see these are excellent materials, and he asks whether he got them by hunting in the great forest because he is only a mentor, while the king tells him not to speak nonsense since a knowledgeable Fenrir lives in that forest. The man looked puzzled by the king's words. He believes the king does not know Granny. Ryu decides to keep quiet about it for now. Apologizing, the man says he came to the king with a request on a friend's recommendation. The king asks who the acquaintance is to clarify the question. Ryu says the friend has no name and is an ordinary huntress. The king turns away, refusing to believe the man's words. Lear telepathically tells the man that the eagle is rude. Ryu says the wolf needs to calm down. The man realizes something is wrong here. Grandma insisted they had known the king for a long time, but he did not seem to remember her. Besides, there are a lot of armed soldiers nearby. The king is absolutely sure the man is lying to his face. Ryu thinks it's worth asking the king directly. Stroking his beard, the king agrees. The king offers to discuss all the conditions with him. He also offers to provide equipment for him. As payment, the man had to leave the skins behind him. The king tried to add something about the skins, but the man rose from his knees and said he would not accept those terms. The king wrinkled his nose and did not trust the man's behavior. He screams, convinced he will not give the king this skin. The king scowled in contempt and asked what it could mean. Ryu says he cannot trust the king, bids him farewell, refuses any bargain despite the king's rank, and then a guard suddenly attacks him. You finally concluded it was not worth telling the king anything. The old man flinched from the tension, and after a moment shouted at the top of his voice that the man was insolent. The king ordered the capture of the man and the liar, and the guards immediately surrounded the travelers with spears. Lear says she can do something about it, but Ryu strictly forbade it because attacking the king would not be tolerated. The king asks the man if he will resist. Ryu says that under this arrangement he cannot defeat the force. The king smiles, accepts that the man chose wisely, and orders him taken to the dungeon. The guard orders the man inside and shoves him forward. Ryu and Lear end up in a dungeon. Ryu puts his hand behind his head, upset that his skin has been taken. Lear looks at the man reproachfully and says they should have fought back in that case. The man tells the woman they would have made many enemies and been expelled from the country. The king could turn against the elder, and Lear now realizes how serious the situation is. Luckily, the Fang stayed with him. Thankfully, the soldiers didn't search him. Only he was distracted by a man behind him. Ryu was so frightened that his soul sank into his heels. The man behind asked the other what he'd been imprisoned for. Ryu was surprised to find someone else in the cell. Because the man had been sitting so quietly, he went unnoticed. The man says he refused to sell the skin to the king. The dwarf inhales and realizes the reason is not important. Ryu wonders why the man is here. The men exchange serious looks and say only one word, treason. The man tried to stop the king from hunting monsters in the great forests. Even if they gathered every head in the kingdom, they still could not defeat Fenrir. Ryu now understands everything, which explains why the king wanted his skin so badly, but it would still be unwise to send them to prison for that, and he says aloud that the king turned out to be quite short-tempered. The guy assumes that because the man knows the elder, the man must be an impressive dwarf. The man says their king planted the guy, and Ryu does not hide his surprise. Then the dwarf explains this is their king's younger brother, named Dwarf. Ryu was stunned by the news. Dwarf had gathered his trusted soldiers and seized the throne, and because he closely resembled their king, no one noticed the substitution. On hearing the plan to attack the great forest, the dwarf understood everything immediately. Ryu asks where the real king is now, and the dwarf says he is being held in solitary confinement. Unlike the others, the real king sits behind a huge iron door, and a strict curse was placed on the room to keep him from leaving. He now knows the elder meant his older brother. I have to get my older brother out and tell him everything. Ryu says he understood everything, urges Lear to go with him, and thanks her for helping him. Surprised, the man asks whether the main character really wants to escape, saying it is impossible, and even a dwarf could not break the lattice. But the main character confidently walks to the bars with Lear and says nothing is impossible for them. He swung with all his might and smashed the iron bars with Fenrir's fang. The bars shattered into pieces, and the dwarf against the wall was stunned by the sight. A stranger wearing a wolf pelt stood in front of him. The man asks who they are. Ryu reaches out to help the dwarf, introduces himself as a mentor, and says the wolf beside him is his familiar. The dwarf understands and accepts his help. They walk down the corridor. Only fragments of the iron bars remain in place and still appear fixed. A man peeks around the corner. Only 2 guards stand at the cursed iron door. When the dwarf asks if the man can really help their king, Ryu explains he has business with their real king and will certainly help them. Cautiously, Ryu asks the dwarf if he may fight. Proudly calling himself a warrior, the dwarf must first get a weapon. A man steps out of the corner, pleased, and and says they will go ahead and the dwarf will have to cover them. The guard had barely woken when two silhouettes hurtled toward him. Suddenly the guards began shouting that he was not allowed here. The man ignored the shouts and silently asked Lear not to get rid of the guards. Lear must try to knock them out without causing much harm. After understanding the men's instructions, he began to act. A guard swung his spear, but the main character still managed to jump away. Ryu sees the guards move much slower than the Fenrir, and their moves are easy to read, so he is confident they will win and attacks a guard from behind. A guard swings his sword at the wolf, saying he will end it with one blow, then looks at his sword and sees the blade is gone as Lear had cut through it and disarmed him. At that moment Ryu steps closer to the guard and says the guard is moving too slowly. The man attacks the guard with his foot. The guards were neutralized. Tell the dwarf loudly that it's done. The dwarf approaches the men, genuinely surprised the man managed to take them down because their soldiers are no pushovers. Ryu explains he's been training a lot. The man asks what they'll do with the door. Ryu taps her finger on the door. Seeing her strength, he knows a curse binds her. The curse was made so no one could escape from the inside, but it does not affect people outside. Ryu grabs the Fenrir Elder's blade again and swings with all his strength, shattering the cursed door into small pieces. Seated by the wall, the king looks up at the newcomers and asks who they are. Ryu steps forward, offers his hand, and says it's nice to meet you. A man gives his name and says his profession, then asks the dwarf if he is Dongvar, king of the dwarves, and the dwarf confirms and asks how they got here. Grinning, Ryu says his brother helped with this. The king lowers his head and apologizes for his foolish brother. Kneeling beside him, Ryu tells the king not to apologize because he has a request to Davar. Ryu asks the king to make equipment for him. The king does not understand the request and asks for a reason to do it. Ryu explains that Fenrir likely recommended the king and praised his skill. The king suddenly became angry and said this was impossible, since Fenrir had never contacted a human or asked anyone to tell the truth. Ryu asked permission to prove his claim, took the elder Fenrir's fang, and asked Lear to change into her human form. The girl transforms into a human. The king is amazed by Fenrir's magic. Ryu introduces the girl as the elder's granddaughter. The man hands the king a fang and asks him to inspect it, and when the king sees the truth, he apologizes for doubting him and agrees to grant the request. He is deeply grateful that the king agreed to help him, and the king says he cannot refuse a Fenrir friend, so as an apology he asks to be allowed to make something from this fang. The king suddenly glares like a child at the fangs of the elders of the Fenrir and says it will be merely a legendary weapon, and he will create a true masterpiece. A chance like this comes once in a lifetime, and he won't let anyone else touch the trophy. The king kneels and asks permission to make a weapon for him. The man is puzzled by the scene because he did not expect that kind of welcome. Knowing the elder, he must let the king make him a weapon. A man smiles and says he counts on the king. The king nods and thanks him for the opportunity. Ryu knows he still must confront the king's brother, but taking back the throne will be harder than it looks. The king reassures his men that the throne still belongs to him. He will gather loyal supporters to present evidence of Dorf's treason. A man begins to leave, but Ryu clenches his fists and asks why they do not overthrow the Lion King. They seem to be planning a counterattack. Ryu and Lear approach another prison room, while a group of dwarves stands to the side watching. Ryu grabs the Fenrir Elder's fang, and after a few swings, cuts through the cage's iron bars. After freeing them, he urges the dwarves to leave. Stepping closer, Ryu asks one of the prisoners whether he is all right, and the dwarf hesitantly agrees. The man turns and addresses the king. He asks whether everyone has been freed and whether anyone else needs help. The king thanked the man for helping to free all his subordinates. Ryu is delighted by this turn of events and now intends to overthrow the Lion King with his new allies. Noticing the man's extreme determination, the king says the man does not need to face the Lion King. The king admits he got into this situation because he let his guard down. The dwarf urges Ryu to let him handle it alone. Clenching his fist over his chest, the king feels it is his duty as an older brother to reason with his younger relative. Ryu noticed the king's worry and even some guilt, agreed with Mr. Davar, and asked him to be careful. The king told the man that if he and Lear turned left, they could find a hidden passage leading outside. Mr. Davar will contact Ryu after he finishes his business. After finishing his conversation with the man, the king decided to boost his subordinates' morale. Mr. Davar raised his hand and urged his associates to return the throne to the true ruler. You stood watching the crowd storm off. The man suggested Lear go back to the hotel. The girl agreed. The group follows the path Mr. Davar described. One of them says they should turn left. Suddenly Lear spots something unusual. Her ears swivel to locate the sound. Lear asks Ryu if he heard anything, and Ryu says he didn't. Lear's ears start reacting again to the faint sound that reached her moments earlier. The voice sounded familiar to Lear. Ryu was already worried and asked Deer if it could be a monster, and she wasn't sure but pointed to the exact direction the sound came from. Ryu walked to the corner, waited a moment, then jumped out from behind it holding the Fenrir elder's fang. A baby bird lay on the ground, clearly too weak to stand and nearly lifeless. The girl wants to know how the chick ended up here. Ryu suggests the chick may have become lost here because it looks weak. Ryu reaches out her hand toward the chick to check its condition. The chick notices the movement and starts to squeak loudly. As it squeals, large flames shoot from its beak, nearly hitting Ryu and lace her. The man was genuinely surprised that the chicken could breathe fire, but Lear says this is not surprising because it is a monster, not an animal. The chicken starts squeaking unpredictably as more flames come from its beak, and Ryu holds his palms out, saying he is not its enemy. The chicken gave one last squeak and fell. You might be wondering what the problem was. He sees no external damage. The man lifted the chicken into his arms. Lear assumed he was hungry because she also felt weak when hungry. Ryu searched his pockets for food, then realized all their belongings had been confiscated. Ryu suggests Lear take the chicken with her and keep trying to get out of the dungeon, and the man promises to get the creature something to eat as soon as they leave. They escape the dungeon. They are sitting at a table near the hotel. Lear and Ryu got food for the chicken. The chicken eagerly ate the food they kindly gave him. Ryu grins and realizes that, despite its small size, the chicken will feed 3. Lear notices he looks healthy now. Ryu agrees with the girl and picks up the chicken. The man holds it out in his palms so it can fly back home. The chicken does not fly away. It turns to Ryu and after another squeak, begins to stroke his palm. Lear notices the chicken has grown attached to the man. Ryu agrees with the girl's observation. Lear asks you if he wants to sign a contract with the monster. The man tells the woman he did not save the creature for that reason at all. Ryu believes that if the chicken wants to be near him, he will not mind at all. He then turns to the chicken and asks if it wants to sign a contract with him. Lear looked reproachful and clearly displeased, then turned away and reminded the man that she was following him too, leaving everyone to wonder what the girl was thinking. Without thinking, the man suggests relaxing at the hotel today and visiting King Davar's palace tomorrow. Morning sunlight poured into the room with full force, keeping the man from sleeping another minute. Ryu wrinkles his nose, puzzled why it's so hard for him, and feels a heavy weight pressing on his stomach. Ryu sits up and rubs his eyes, thinking Leo might have climbed onto the bed. Instead of Lyris, a huge bird lay on the bed, keeping Ryu from sleeping peacefully. The man stares at the bird, clearly bewildered. Even after realizing it, he still refused to believe his eyes. Ryu screamed and woke Lear up as the girl rubbing her eyes asked why the man was screaming. Then he pointed at the bird in a panic and told Lear to look. Lear instantly recognizes the bird as the chicken they rescued and tamed in the dungeon yesterday. Ryu checks with a girl and asks why the creature has grown so large. Lear says the monster must have grown much stronger. Monsters can evolve by absorbing magical energy. Ryu couldn't have suspected that. Lear thought it over again, since events like this are very rare. The girl believes this baby might be someone. Lear does not have time to finish when a loud knock sounds at the door. It turns out soldiers have come for Ryu, and the bird is greatly frightened by the unexpected noise. The bird jumped and instantly spread its wings. A few seconds later, it fluttered up and hurried out the window. A maid enters the room and urges Ryu to answer because he is already awake. Ryu and Lear only had time to watch the bird's flight path. The king has summoned Ryu and is already waiting, so Ryu and Lear approach the throne and greet his majesty, and the king says he is glad to see him. Ryu asks King Davar if he has dealt with his younger brother, and the king agrees, saying it all happened thanks to Ryu. The king asked Ryu to talk to someone before Ryu started equipping and arming the man. Abruptly, the king rudely addressed the silhouette standing on the steps to the throne and ordered him to speak to Ryu. The silhouette belonged to the king's younger brother, Dorf. Dorf folded his hands and addressed Mr. Ryu and Mrs. Lear. The king's younger brother suddenly drops to his knees and bows his head before the man, offering a sincere apology. You agree and notice that Dorf seems like a different person. Then Lear steps out from behind the man and asks Dorf why he decided to pretend to be the king. Ashamed, Dorf began to say he had always envied his older brother. Dorf's brother is a world-famous master. Everyone in the neighborhood talked about him, and the youngest wasn't even trusted with materials. In front of everyone here, the younger brother admits he was deeply offended by this arrangement. The dwarf admits he will one day lure his brother into a trap and put him in a car. Now that the younger brother has taken the king's place and controls the country's resources, the dwarf can get anything he wants. Dwarf says Ryu and Lear then appeared. The king's younger brother immediately saw from the items the man had obtained that Ryu had brought a first-class, A-rank product not found anywhere in the country. Dwarf admits that when he learned the man was a mentor, he immediately realized it would be easier to take materials for reuse. But the Lion King remembers the man refused to sell the materials, and Dwarf then realized Ryu had seen through him and that he had made a terrible mistake because he could not control himself. The younger brother bows his head to the man one last time and asks for forgiveness, and you understand everything and forgive Dwarf. Suddenly King Davar joins his younger brother in apologizing and sincerely asks you to forgive his brother and listen to one request. King Davar, very serious, asked Ryu to let Dwarf make equipment for the man. The younger brother was extremely surprised by the king's proposal. After a moment, Dwarf objected to his brother, but Ryu interrupted them. He asks why the king made the request. King Davar explains he can still make the strongest weapons, but his brother is much better at making equipment. Clenching his fist, the king says this will be their redemption. The king's memories linger. The first brother wipes sweat from his brow, tired from the hard work he has done, while another brother examines a precious dagger that seems to sparkle in his eyes. They had always done everything together, but he began to drift away and take all the orders for himself, denying his brother the chance to grow and not realizing how much it would hurt him. He waved goodbye and Dwarf, watching him, felt upset. Now the king and his brother stand with Lear and Ryu in the middle of the corridor, and the king believes that if he had not acted, they could have avoided this conflict. As an older brother, he failed. Dwarf tries to reason with him and says this is not true. The king ignores him, vouches for his skills, and asks if Mr. Ryu can satisfy one of his requests. Lear then called his name, and he, realizing what she meant, said he relied on the king's younger brother. The king thanks you, but his brother still does not understand why the king agreed, and the gentleman explains he couldn't refuse the services of two of the country's best craftsmen, and if they make top-quality equipment and weapons, there will be no problems. The king asks Dwarf if he understood everything clearly. The younger brother still cannot believe it. Claiming he has done so much evil, he asks his older brother if everything is really okay. His older brother tells him to build the world's best equipment for you if he truly regrets what he did. He has always called himself a great master and insists on proving it through deeds, not by falling into disgrace. He asks Dwarf not to let him down because it will cost him his reputation and urges him to do their job to the fullest, like in the good old days when they did everything together. The king offers his hand, and his younger brother takes it, tears of joy rolling down his face. Dwarf deftly raises his brother's hand and declares he will make the best equipment in this country. Ryu has been watching and joining their conversation, saying he is glad the brothers have finally reconciled. The king apologizes for making him wait, and once the problems are sorted out, it's time to move on. Sometime later in a small village, Tia says they haven't been back here for a long time and adds that a crowd of residents will surely gather, while the man beside her says she's a hero, and it's no surprise everyone loves her. Wanting to meet Ryu right away, he asks the girl to hurry because they have been friends for a long time and haven't seen each other in ages. She agrees with Taiga and hopes the guy is okay because they want to discuss many things with him. As they approach the house, they see it has been destroyed. Anyone could enter and inspect the entire interior. The two heroes are stunned and don't know what to do because everything was fine when they left home. The guard approaches, calls them heroes, and asks why they are here. The girl tries to tell him about Ryu but can't form a sentence. Tia only cares about what happened to Ryu and where he is. A man tells Tia to calm down and not to panic prematurely, then explains to the guard that this is their friend's house and asks what happened, since everything was fine before he left. The man says their friend is missing. They stand frozen, staring at him in shock and unable to speak. The news was completely unexpected. Tia can't understand how he could have disappeared, and Taiga, in turn, asks how long he's been gone. He tells them it had been about 2 months when one night the man heard a loud noise, and by the time he ran to the house, it was already destroyed and he had no time to do anything. The guy asks the guard if he has any idea why the man was left behind, but the guard cannot read minds. The missing man worked hard every day and helped everyone with the cattle, so no one expected him to be gone. The guard, regret on his face, says when they began searching they found only scraps of wool in the house, and he does not think it is the hair of an ordinary animal. A monster likely took him, and the girl's face changes instantly. Tia spins around and goes to her horse, saying she is going to look for the main character. Taiga tries to stop her because they still have a mission. She tells him she'll look for you and won't forget the mission, so he has nothing to worry about, while Taiga says she does not know where to look but does not care and will search everywhere for him. She declares you should wait for her because she will definitely find him and not let him die. At Ryu's location, he suddenly sneezes after mentioning Tia, and Lear beside him wonders if he's ill. The rescue operation has begun. At his anvil, the king's younger brother forges weapons while everyone else watches from the sidelines. When everyone in the room sees he failed to melt the material, they sigh in despair. Ryu draws conclusions and explains to him that this material does not melt and suggests he try again. Dwarf looks sad and disappointed and says he has tried to melt it dozens of times with no success, so you realize it will not be easy to melt and the fang is too strong. The dwarf realizes that because this is Fenrir's fang, a flame as powerful as an elder's can melt it. Ryu can't tell if a flame like Fenrir's really exists. The cat-eared girl remembers something. He asks what they think about the Garda flame, and the hero, stunned, repeats the question she just asked. A brother joins the conversation, unsure what kind of hail this is or whether she means the legendary bird. Another brother says he heard Nazna can kill dragons, but the elder doubts these are anything more than children's fairy tales. Did they really see her? After they offered to use the guard, the girl turned to the man and asked if he still understood what she meant. He explains they found a baby bird in the dungeon, asks where it came from, and is surprised it was a guard, while the girl says his magic helped it grow quickly and ordinary monsters cannot grow like that overnight. Only high-ranking monsters can do something like that, so she is sure it was hailed. The older brother asks where he is, and Ryu tries to explain. Dorf concluded he had flown away. The king believes he is probably on the mountain behind the castle. Dorf asks his brother if he is sure, since it has been a long time since he left. But he tells him they have no other choice, and only the guard can make a powerful flame to melt the fangs. Unable to leave the castle unattended and feeling guilty, the brothers ask Mr. Ryu to search for him. He reassures them they can rely on him and need not worry, sometime later. A girl and a man are in the desert. The main character promised the brothers he would find Garrett, but Garrett was hard to find. The man thought he had spoken too presumptuously, and the woman said he might be right. When Guard sensed the main character's mana, he should have flown to him immediately since he remembered him, and no one expected him to be bait. The main character tells her to look somewhere else, because there are many places they still haven't checked. The girl's ears prick at a sound, and she asks him to stop, because Lear heard voices from the other side. They turn and see the little bird fighting to escape, so it does not fall into the monster's mouth while the monster chases it. The heroes recognize Gerard, and the girl notices he's oddly flapping his wings and can barely run. Ryu says he's probably injured and tells Lear to hurry, while the girl says she understands, and they rush to help him. The monster moved close to the little chick and nearly attacked, but Lear stopped it just in time. She asks the protagonist if Garrett is all right. Ryu inspects the bird and says he sees no visible injuries, but that does not mean the bird is fully healthy. They return to the castle to discuss the flame they will need later to melt the fang. After a while, everyone is in the castle. Garrett lies unconscious on a pillow but is regaining his strength. Ryu did not expect the bird to be so close, which surprised him since he had thought the guard would fly much farther away, and Lear suggests he may not have parents. The main character asks Lear if she really thinks that was why he ended up alone in the dungeon and not for some other reason. The girl says he had nowhere to go back to, so he could not have flown far from them. Ryu suddenly understands everything. The king enters and asks the main character how the guard is. He says he's fine, just a little tired, so Garrett should be given some time to rest. Only you can't be completely sure you'll help them. The bird begins to wake slowly. The man notices it. He checks the guard's condition and says he can rest a little longer. The bird did not expect to see so many people after its awakening. Immediately, she flies to Ryu, clings to his shoulder, and chatters something in her bird language. The main character asks whether he is still afraid of people and asks him not to do it. Someone calms him, saying it's safe here and he has nothing to worry about so he can relax. The girl watches them for a while. He then asks whether the main character wants to sign a contract with Gerard, and Ryu was surprised and still cannot understand why he would do that. Lear warns that if they are not there, the bird may get into trouble. He needs someone he can rely on, and the best solution would be a contract. Ryu agrees the contract is a good idea, but wants Goddard to decide for himself. Ryu asks Garda to sign a contract with him because he could really use his strength. If he doesn't want that, he can fly away safely and still hear his answer, so he asked what he would choose. Everyone in the room watches the man and the bird. The bird looks intently at the main character. Garrett flaps its wings and lifts off the ground. The man watches its movements carefully, a little shocked. The bird sits on his shoulder, accepting his proposal, and chirps happily to him in its bird language. Rue can hardly believe it and asks whether he is sure about his decision. The bird squeaks, confirming that decision once more. Lear praises the man for managing to sign a contract with the legendary bird because that's so difficult. The man thanks her and asks what she should call him. Nearby, Dorf hesitates to contact Garrett, and the king says this is a rare opportunity, suggesting they continue in the city square for the beautiful views. Later, the four of them and guard arrived at the square, and Ryu could not understand why so many people were there. Both guards and state residents are present. Someone shouts the king's name. The hero then asks whether it is all right that so many people have gathered here. The king apologized to him because his rank made attention unavoidable, and he did not want to draw more notice. He asks whether they should come another day, but Ryu says everything is fine and they should finish as soon as possible, since waiting weeks will only stretch it out a few more days. The main character holds the bird in his hand and says he will now give him a name and sign a contract with him. He tells the legendary bird he will perform a ritual now to make them a family, asks God to agree, and God beeps in approval. The main character begins the ritual as the bird leans closer to the gun. Ryu smiled at the bird and said his name was now Kareen. The bird closed her eyes at his words. A hurricane made of flames appears in their place, sweeping away everything in its path. The king cannot understand what is happening, and Rue is just as lost because this has never happened before, but Lear sees something in the hurricane and calls to the man to look where she is pointing. An egg appeared inside the hurricane and hovered in the air with nothing beside it. The group comes closer, unsure if Karin is here, and Lear says Garrett is probably evolving, while Rue says only high-ranking monsters can do that. He still can't tell whether Karin is one. Lear then explains to the main character that evolution means gaining a new form and power. Because of Ryu's power, she will be able to evolve. She's curious about what the guard will look like, and they will need to greet her properly. The egg began to crack. The main character said Karin was hatching, and he held out his hands to catch anyone who might fall. A girl with wings falls, and you catch her just in time, gently setting her on the ground. Worried that Karina hatched so suddenly, he asks if she's okay. Garrett only calls him Dad in response. He can't believe he was called that because it surprised him, but Karin goes on to say that even after all the time since they last met, he hasn't changed and is still so cool. He had said they'd be close as a family, but he didn't expect her to take it so seriously or for Karin to call him Dad. Those questions haunted him. Ryu kept wondering why she became human and why she called him Daddy. Karin said she had always been alone. When she was born, there were no parents or friends, so she kept searching for them, but as soon as people saw her they attacked, and she spent her life running from them. Now Lear understands why she ran when she heard soldiers' footsteps approaching. Karin says she saw everything correctly, but that day her dad and sister helped her. By that she means you and Lear. This was the first time she had been treated so kindly. Both of them won her over. She chose to take a form like theirs, a human form. They look at each other, then Ryu walks up to Karina and pats her on the head, saying he understood everything, while the king's voice comes from the hurricane asking if Mr. Ryu is all right and telling him to respond. The hero says everything is fine and asks Karin to put out the flame, and she does so immediately. Ryu waves to get noticed, and Dorf spots the men walking in single file. The main character approaches the brothers and says everything went fine. Dorf doesn't realize how impressive it is because they caused a real firestorm here. After the younger brother calms down, the king asks who the girl beside him is, then tells the brothers she is Karin and has chosen to take human form. Dorf is stunned by what he heard because a guard stands before him, while the king is not surprised at all, since this is exactly what you would expect from the legendary bird. Ryu asks if they can handle it with Karin's help and says that with that force they won't have any problems. Ryu then said it was time for them to return to the workshop and get to work, and asked them to calm the townspeople. On the way back, Karin's feather fell out and stayed on the ground. One young man lifted him and studied him quietly, murmuring that he wanted to find out who this Ryu was because he was clearly unusual. 1 month later, Dorf asks the main character to try on his creation, while Lear stands beside him, also waiting. The dwarf calls this his masterpiece, a leather armor he made himself. Rue is thrilled, saying the armor is incredible and he can't believe he created it. Dorf says it's all thanks to rare materials. He also applied an effect that locks the temperature in place, and the main character asks him to explain what that means in more detail. He tells him simply that neither fire nor ice magic will work against armor. They should thank Kareen for the resistance to fire magic. He achieved this by adding her feathers to the material. Confident that protection from cold and heat will be very useful, Ryu's eyes sparkled as he thanked Dorf with delight. Only the sword remains, and the king enters the room asking to be forgiven for waiting. He tells him the blade is ready. The main character says the work was worth the wait, and a surprised Dorf reveals the blade is made of Fenrir's fang. Ryu wonders if it was meant to be a dagger and why it is sharpened on only one side. The king tells him this blade is special and was made using techniques from the East, because one-sided sharpening makes the edge sharper. Kareen, who entered with the king, says she also helped him make this weapon. Ryu pats her head while praising her. He says that now all that remains is to give the blade a name. The main character doesn't understand why it needs one. The king says it is important that he can make the engraving so everyone knows the blade belongs to him and only he can use it. 127. You did not expect such a request, so he could think of nothing. Then a brilliant idea suddenly came to him. He suggests naming the blade Wolf. The king says it will now bear that name. Lear says it was predictable, and Ryu does not understand the problem. The oldest brother says there's no point in destroying it and that it's better to test it in real combat. The main character agrees. Later, a huge crowd gathered again in the city center square around Ryu and his comrades, and someone in the crowd said a show was apparently planned and they were looking forward to it. The main character is surprised to see the crowd so large, and the king says regretfully that apparently they have heard about him again. The king assured him not to worry because citizens would be kept away. Ryu said he understood but would not get carried away to avoid accidentally harming civilians. The king told him to start. All eyes were on the speaker, who announced that the king's own blade was about to be tested and that the test would begin immediately. At last the king orders him to release all the blade's magic so the king can see how strong it is. Ryu says he understood everything and now stands alone in the square. All eyes are on him, and though he was told not to hold back, he worries his power could hurt people, so he decides it's safer to punch the sky. He swung his sword, and everyone watched closely the strike's path and where it was headed. The clouds scatter from such a blow. Everyone is stunned, even Ryu. The crowd cheered, called it amazing, said they had not expected to see this, and admired the main character's incredible strength. Even Ryu can hardly believe it. Karin says her dad is the strongest. Lear steps closer and tells him she expected nothing less. The king approaches the hero and says this is to be expected from Fenrir's fang, because its concentration of magical power is on a completely different level. The king began to talk about what would happen if everything went his way, but a voice asking everyone to look up distracted them from the conversation. Everyone looked up and saw a dragon in the sky getting closer by the second, with someone standing on the dragon itself. Ryu is frozen in shock as a dragon appears in the clouds, flying straight toward them with several people visible on its back. When the dragon nears the ground, the people on its back jump down. 4 of them stand before the main character and his companions, all wearing the same uniform. The man in front opens the conversation and says he and Ryu haven't seen each other in a long time. The man stands confused and cannot understand how he knows the other man, while Lear brightens when she sees him and calls him Grandpa. Ryu stands stunned for a few seconds, then realizes he is an elder, and the man smiles and says the main character is seeing him in human form for the first time, not as a dragon. Then the main character notices the people standing behind him are Dad, Mom, and Grandma Lear, but he thinks her grandmother looks too young. As if reading his thoughts, she asks whether he's thought about why she looks so young. He denies it and says he hasn't thought about anything like that. The king approaches Mr. Fenrir and asks how he is doing. Mr. Fenrir answers that he has no complaints about his health and that everything is going well. The king still wonders why they came here. The elder replies he only wanted to talk to Ryu. He wants to ask something but not in front of everyone, so he'd rather talk about it later when they're alone. The main character wants to know what Mr. Fenrir wanted from him, and Mr. Fenrir starts to explain that a very troublesome creature has just woken up. The Dragon of Evil gave him that name. A massive 3-headed creature that could use all kinds of magic. The elder had fought it before but could not defeat it, so he had no choice but to seal it. Ryu pictured him and said he was a real demon and didn't want to deal with him. Mr. Fenrir said he had recently felt the seal weaken, so I decided to prepare for the battle. He will need allies in the fight, so he went to ask Ryu for help, but Ryu cannot even imagine facing that and will not be able to fight it. Ryu steps closer to the elder and asks whether the elder really believes he can handle the dragon. The elder laughs and says he also studied in the great forest and is now a cut above any human being. He tells the main character to be a bit more confident in himself. Ryu says that since the elder spoke those words to him, he will follow them. Lear, the person peeking out from behind the main character, says he will also help his grandfather. Ryu turns to the elder and asks where the dragon is now. The elder says it is in the Dragon Empire. The seal is in a cave near the Imperial Castle, so this time they will all fight together. He will explain the details of the journey to the kingdom. Ryu can't understand how that is possible. A strange sound comes from behind him. When he turns, he sees a huge dragon. The sight terrifies him. The dragon said it was a rather entertaining sight, since it hadn't expected Fenrir to ask a human for help. Tilting his head toward him, he asked the main character whether he was an elder's disciple. Ryu can hardly believe he's talking to the dragon, who brought the whole Lear family. Mr. Fenrir decided to introduce Ryu to the others. It turns out this is his son-in-law, the Earth Dragon. The elder's son-in-law is pleased to meet the main character and says he's glad to meet them too, while Ryu is shocked that legendary monsters are part of the family and can understand human speech. The crowd in the square doesn't understand what's happening and can't believe the main character can talk to a dragon. Fenrir says his son-in-law will bring them to the Dragon Empire. Ryu says that's a bit much for him since he still lacks confidence in his abilities, and the brothers insist on going and refuse to miss the opportunity. Sometime later, everyone flies to the Dragon Empire, and the elder sits with them to ask the main character about his new girlfriend. He laughs, says he is not only Lear but also Kareen, praises the man, and asks him to look more closely so he will have the strength to care for both of them. A father who is always there. Here is their conversation with Grandpa Lear, who tells the man he is not a good person. First, Ryu stole his daughter from him, and now he is cheating on her and warns that he will soon come to an end. Irritated, the girl's mother hits her husband on the head and tells him to stop talking nonsense. She then turns to the main character and asks him to ignore it. Her husband missed him a lot. Ryu notices they haven't seen each other for a month. He tells her parents that the girl cares deeply about Karin. They always eat together and even bathe together. Lear explains it's because she sees her as her younger sister. Grandpa Lear then asks Karin about her parents and whether they will worry about her. Clinging to her older sister's hand, the girl says she has no parents, but she has Ryu and Lyre. The older sister says everything is fine. Despite her youth, she's fortunate to meet such kind people along the way. He tells Kareen that if his granddaughter thinks of her as a younger sister, she is like a daughter to them. At first it may feel strange, but he asks her to call them her family. The rest of the family smiles at her warmly. Joy fills Kareen's eyes, a smile spreads across her face, and she tells him she understood everything and thanks him. Later, they're riding an Earth Dragon, and he says they'll arrive soon. Ryu looks around, delighted by the view of Earth and its beauty. Looking out over the whole city, it feels enormous, and he can hardly believe his eyes. Leaning down for a better look, he asks if this is the Dragon Empire. The elder confirms his guess and says this entire city and its palace are the Dragon Empire. The dragon joins the conversation and admits he doesn't like the empire because it's so small, and the main character can't understand how it could be called a small country. The dragon said he and the Dragonites were good friends, but because the Dragonites are as tall as humans, the palace had to be built to human standards. Luckily, he can transform with magic and live there in peace, though Ryu said it would be difficult. Later, they reach the gate. The Earth Dragon asks them to move on. Ryu thanks him. A long-haired man appears in front of him, leaning over his face. The dragon says it will show them around, and the main character did not expect the Earth Dragon to take on human form so abruptly. Arriving at the gate, guarded by sentries, they greet the master and bow to him, and he thanks the guards for their hard work. Someone asks if the people with him are his friends. The gentleman confirms they are Fenrir and his family. One guard can hardly believe it and says that with such legendary monsters on their side, victory is certain. The second guard looks at Ryu and asks who he is, and the other guard explains that Ryu is his student. The guards cannot accept that their master's disciple could be human and voice concern that people are too weak, and Ryu is annoyed but has no reply, since compared to the guards, the disciple really is weak. Father Lear grows enraged and accuses the guards of calling the student who trained with their elder a weakling, and a guardian, alarmed by his menacing aura, hurriedly says they did not mean that. Ryu wonders why her father is so angry and defends him. The girl says he probably thought people saw them as weak. Filled with anger and determination, Father Lear finally says he understands everything and vows they will show how strong their student is. They had just entered the gate when Father Lear asked them to call his boss and said Ryu would kill him in 2 seconds, and the man did not understand how he had ended up in that situation or why others were making decisions for him. The boss looks intimidating. Small horns rise from his forehead, and now they stand apart from the crowd to begin their duel. Father Lear shouts from the crowd that the guy should not even dare to lose, while Karin only wishes the main character good luck. All this puts heavy pressure on Ryu, and he dislikes it because he never wanted to get involved in any fights. The Earth Dragon calls them over and asks them to discuss the duel rules. He asks if they will agree that if one side cannot continue fighting, it automatically loses, and the boss says he has no objections, and the main character standing before him does too. The boss warns that even though Ryu is an ordinary person, he will not hold back and tells him to get ready. The Earth Dragon lowers his hand and announces the duel can begin. As soon as the signal to start the flight sounded, the boss wasted no time and attacked. The attacker moved so fast he was already close and had his sword aimed at the main character, but the main character stopped him just in time and with difficulty managed to fend off the attack. The boss retreated to wait for a better moment to attack, and that moment came immediately, bringing him back up close to the main character with his sword. Seeing how hard it is for the boy, he asks what will happen if the boy really plans to face the Black Dragon with such forces. Ryu can't handle this many attacks. It's beyond his strength. His opponent is both strong and fast, and Ryu has no way to counterattack, but he can't give up now because his reputation is at stake. He knows he must use the sword technique. Attacking with magic gives him a chance, but he must hold back his power and overcome him at the right moment. When their swords touch again, he realizes it's time to use the sword technique and presses the tip of his blade to his opponent's sword. Unprepared for the magical force, he crashes into the wall hard enough to leave a large dent. Everyone watching is shocked, including Ryu. The main character holds the blade carefully because he is not yet used to the wolf's power. The Earth Dragon raises his hand to signal the duel is over and declares Ryu the winner. The guards, who had been watching, ran to their commander lying on the floor. Father Lear walks up to the man and praises him, saying he is doing well. Karin steps forward too, rejoicing in her father's victory. Ryu is more worried about his opponent's condition. Turning to the Earth Dragon, he asks if he is all right. The man tells him nothing terrible happened because they had agreed to a duel, and Ryu breathed a sigh of relief at his words. An elder approaches the man, puts a hand on his shoulder, and says the main character has grown stronger. The Earth Dragon tells them he will open the gates to the Dragon Empire, then places his hands on the doors and pushes them open. Everyone froze in anticipation. He opens these gates with a slow, heavy motion. He still manages it, and a sweeping view opens before them, showing the Empire's natural beauty. The Earth Dragon leads them. As they pass a house, a man stands at the window with his face hidden in shadow and says he never thought the Dragon Army's soldiers could be defeated so easily because it seemed impossible. He is looking forward to meeting the people who have just arrived, as they have very interesting personalities. The travelers are walking down the main street, where many people have gathered. Ryu walks around, carefully straightening the streets and saying this place is very beautiful. The Earth Dragon tells him this is the land of dragons, so human lands are very different. Karin pauses and looks closely at the store counter. Ryu and Lear notice this and approach her. The girl asks what happened. Karin hadn't expected anyone to follow her and tell her everything was fine. Seeing bows laid out on the store counter, Lear assumes the woman wanted to buy one and asks if she liked them. After hearing their conversation, the Earth Dragon says there is still a little time before the battle, so they can walk around the city on their own. The main character then invites them to go shopping and buy whatever they want. The girls immediately agree and are delighted by the offer. Later, the dragon says they must meet the Emperor first. Everyone they pass is busy with their own work. There are many different races here, not just dragons, and the Earth Dragon walking in front says he noticed correctly and that the dragons treat all races favorably. Remember, dragonites are half dragon and half human, and after evolving some developed a lizard-like head. Curious, the main character listens and asks what kind of dragon emperor he is. The dragon says the emperor is the strongest in the empire and far more powerful than he is. The man cannot believe the emperor's strength. The Earth Dragon interrupts his thoughts, says he will understand everything as soon as he sees him, and asks him to enter the hall since they have already arrived and finished talking. The door opens. Before him, the emperor and empress sit on the throne. Both appear friendly, and Ryu notices their aura is unlike the others, making it immediately clear they are the imperial family. The Earth Dragon bows and greets the emperor. Rising from their thrones, both step toward the travelers who have just entered. the Emperor greets the Earth Dragon, and the Empress says she did not expect him to find so many allies. Especially a man capable of defeating the captain of the guards, she says, and gives him an appreciative look. Her expression shifts into a slight smile, and she says she has never seen such strong people. He is counting on the main character. The Earth Dragon turns to the man and asks him to respond. The Emperor interrupts their conversation and says he wants to discuss tactics with the Fenrir family first. The Empress adds that rooms have been prepared for them. The group looks at the rulers of the dragon country in surprise. The elder asks, "Except with them, consider the others as well." Hearing the question, the Emperor's expression changes, and he hesitates before saying that only they will take part in the battle. Above all, Ru was shocked by the news and still can't believe that only they will take part in the fight. The Emperor, looking regretful, says this is true because they once kept friendly ties with other races, but since the hero appeared, they have stopped supporting them. The elder says he understands everything. The main character stands in stunned silence, trying to process what he just heard. Their small numbers make him fear they will not be all right. The conversation makes him remember the hero. Remembering that Tia has become a hero, he considers asking her for help, but the Earth Dragon says it won't work. The current hero treats all monsters as enemies and attacks even half-humans. The protagonist can't believe Tia would attack everyone like that since he knows her personally, and she isn't that kind of person. The Fenrir family head realizes they have almost no chance of winning in this situation. The Emperor apologizes. Ru realized that before their journey, Taiga had mentioned Tia's strange behavior. When the hero asks Taiga if Tia has been acting strange lately, Taiga says it's true, and that when they accept a request to fight monsters, her look changes beyond recognition, and he sometimes gets scared. Ryu can hardly believe his own words, because he remembers Tia used to be a real crybaby. Taiga remembers that too. Even so, he asks the main character whether he knows what might have happened to her, and the main character says he has no idea. Taiga says a heroic spirit may be in her, which explains her behavior, and he hopes that is true. Ryu thinks the cause is different, and that explains why the girl hates monsters so much. Meanwhile, Tia and Taiga, on a mission and searching for the main character, cannot understand this absurd request. The man is outraged. To forge a weapon from the fangs of Fenrir, you need the guardian flame and a way to obtain it. Those were the king's words. He told them that if they gathered all the materials, he would create legendary weapons for them. Tiger says he heard the king of this country is a skilled blacksmith, and the man beside him says that makes sense because proper materials are needed to make a powerful weapon. Tia asks them to forget the weapon, but the girl behind her asks what their visit is for. Priestess Maria says Tia is a hero and always in danger. That night, Gran, who is on the hero's team, joined Tia, and Maria joined her too. He agrees with Maria and says Tia needs a good weapon because she is a hero. Tiger suggests they first go to the guild, where they might find information about the materials they need, and the whole team agrees. Later, they arrived at the guild and found everyone there staring at them. The knight notices this and cannot make sense of what is happening. As soon as they mention Fenrir and guard, the people around them stare suspiciously, and when they ask about them, the locals fall silent and say nothing. Tia suggests that something bad may have happened in this country. An unknown man in a black robe approaches the team, his face hidden, and asks whether they truly want to learn more about Fenrir and the legendary bird of Garda. She asks who he is, while the young man claims to be an information dealer. He asks why the hero is interested in Fenrir and Gard. The girl says the king told them that to get weapons, they must take Fenrir's fangs and Gard's flame. Gran approaches the information dealer and tells him he clearly knows something, offering any price for the information, but the merchant refuses payment and asks to hear a story. A month ago, a man arrived in this country, accompanied by Fenrir and Garrett, and helped put down the rebellion of the king's younger brother. In short, he's now the hero of their country. Tia doesn't understand what that is supposed to mean, because she is a hero. The merchant goes on, saying there are rumors the hero hates monsters, but that man is friends with Fenrir and Gerardard, which contradicts the rumors, and he fears their hero will just cut down Fenrir and Gerard. Giving them more information would let their hero kill his allies from their country and then come back to take revenge. Maria asks about it, so no one wants to tell them. The merchant answered vaguely. Taiga asks Tia what's wrong and why she's quiet. The girl stands with her back to them and says nothing. Turning around, she promised to deal with the hero herself. The girl heads for the exit and thanks the information dealer. Taiga tries to stop her. Determined to destroy every monster, the girl leaves the guild and vows that once this is over, Tia will find Ryu. Meanwhile, Ryu sits at the table with Lear and Karin, tired and resting his head on the table, relieved they're finally done so he can take a break. Nothing was decided at the meeting because the Dragon Emperor and the Elder kept discussing battle tactics, so he had nothing to do there. Lear suggests they take a walk in the palace. Kareen instantly agrees with the girl's proposal, and you have no objections. However, the main character believes one should not wander the palace without first warning someone. As he opens the door to leave, a maid greets him. Ryu is surprised because he has already seen that maid standing beside the Empress. The maid asks where he is going, and the main character, shocked, says they only wanted to explore the palace a little, making the maid look at them with suspicion. Immediately she changes her expression and asks them to follow her. Kareen is very pleased with the result. The characters move forward, and the man feels a strange, unexplained sensation. She may have been standing outside the door, listening the whole time they were in the room. Later, the mage leads them to the dining room, the library, and the training area where the knights are practicing. She leads them to the Imperial Garden. All three are delighted by the beauty, and I can't take my eyes off her. Kareen says the garden looks great. Lear agrees completely. The main character says it is very beautiful here, and the maid said she was glad the guests liked it because the princess likes it here too. Ryu is unsure which princess is meant, so he asks the maid if a princess is here. The maid confirms there is one and says she is very important to their country. Ryu says he understands but still has one question. Pointing to a column with a lock of hair showing, he asks who is hiding there. A little girl steps out of hiding and says he did notice her after all. All three are shocked to find a child standing in front of them. The girl walked up to the main character and stared at him, and he doesn't understand why she is just standing there asking if she needs something from him. The question leaves her stunned and unable to answer him. She scrambles for an excuse, but nothing works. Turning to his sword, she gets a brilliant idea. The girl asks him to give it to her, and Ryu immediately says he cannot, leaving everyone present silent for a moment. His refusal surprises the little girl. The reason for his refusal baffles her. The main character tells her these are not toys for children. 299. Those words anger her, and she taps her foot on the floor while insisting she is not a child. Ryu looks lost and stares blankly at the maid. The maid understands, apologizes, and says she'll call her parents right away. Guy says it's okay and he'll wait. He crouches in front of her and says her parents are coming. Kareen asks whether the girl is lost. The girl grows angrier, starts to shake, and tells them not to mock her. She declares she will take his sword by force and throws herself at the main character, but he defiantly dodges and prevents her from taking it. Confused by her actions, he watches as the girl starts screaming and demands his sword. The girl runs back to the man to grab his sword, but Ryu stops her again and runs away from her. The main character notices the girl moves too fast for a child, but she is too predictable. She refuses to accept no and reaches toward the man, demanding he give her what she wants, but he repeats that he will not and finally asks Lear and Korin for help. The girls won't step in during their showdown with her. Lear says he's managing fine on his own, and Karin only asks the main character to play with her the same way later, so Ryu understands he can't expect any help from them. Angry, the girl starts shaking and screaming at him for disobeying her, and she is pissed off. Overcome with emotion, the girl forcefully shakes her clenched fists. Ryu now sees sharp claws right in front of him. He has no idea how it happened. The girl says he angered her, asks if he has any last words, then points at his face and tells him to take it. Seeing the nails coming toward his face, he suddenly runs away, and the princess in turn crashes hard into a column, hitting her head. Stepping back to a safe distance, he watches the girl still shaking with anger and worried that she is sitting on the ground trembling, asks whether she is all right. When the princess turns to face him, the main character sees her crying and says she isn't paying. He doesn't know what to do because he's actually to blame for the blow. He sits down beside her while she stays on the floor, still crying, asking why she can't beat him since she's much stronger, and he asks her to calm down. He asks them to call a doctor. A voice behind apologizes for the wait. It was the May. She brought the Empress and they are heading straight toward them. The man cannot believe the Empress came here, so he springs to his feet and walks over to her now, asking what she has forgotten here since the maid said she would call her parents. However, the Empress bows her head before him and asks forgiveness for her daughter's bad behavior. His whole world is collapsing because he cannot accept that she could be the Empress's daughter. The Empress lifts her head and with regret confirms he understood correctly. She really is the Empress's daughter. The maid says her granddaughter is there, but the main character refuses to accept that the young woman could be her granddaughter. He asks the maid why she did not stop the princess as soon as she began misbehaving. The maid looks away and says she doesn't know how to talk to children. His brain finally broke down, and he tries to figure out who the girl's father is since her mother is the Empress. He finally realizes the girl sitting on the floor before him is the heir to the throne. Ryu still cannot accept that the girl who tried to steal his sword is a princess of the Dragon Empire. An elder comes around the corner and tells Ryu he is always at the center of events, and a surprised Ryu watches the elder greet the maid as Tiamat while she says she is pleased to see him. The Fenrir clan leader doesn't understand what's going on. After the elder was briefed, it became clear the girl tried to steal Ryu's sword. She insists it wasn't her fault, and Ryu kept dodging her attacks. If he had stayed still, she would have certainly beaten him. Her grandmother can no longer stand such a disgrace and asks the girl to calm down. He tells her she lost and asks her to accept it now because it looks like she will have to make their daily training tougher. The maid bows at a 90-degree angle, repeatedly asking the main character for forgiveness, and Ryu waves it off, saying he shouldn't have done it and that he's fine, but Tiamat has one request for him. She asks him to help train the princess, placing her hand on the princess's head as she speaks. The request leaves the man stunned, and he can hardly believe it. He asks whether they cannot find anyone stronger, and the maid says that in that case the princess will be afraid to arrive. When she is with him, she feels calmer. Her parents also want to ask him about it, since she will inherit the throne and they want her prepared, so they are asking him for a lot of help. Ryu says he agrees but worries he'll be a bad teacher, when an elder steps up behind him, puts a hand on his shoulder, and tells him to agree, saying even the dragons bowed before him and that he himself still needs training. After a pause, Ryu agreed to help train the girl and asked everyone to raise their heads. The princess's grandmother thanked him, but he wasn't finished and said he had a request in return. Placing his hand on his chest, he said that in return he wanted Tiamat to teach him too. She doesn't know what to teach him, but the main character explains he wants to prepare better for battle and that her lessons will help him. Smiling sweetly, the maid says she has no objection to these training sessions. The man is overjoyed and thanks her. Turning to Karin, he starts to tell them they can rest for now, but the girl cuts him off before he finishes and says she is not satisfied and will train too. Ryu can't understand why she'd do that since it could be dangerous, and Karin says she just wants to help her dad. She doesn't want to stay away forever, and the main character wants to calm her. The elder steps into the conversation and says he will personally take over training the guard, and Karin can hardly believe it and asks him whether that is true. Ryu asks if everything will be okay, and the elder says that because she asked like that he cannot refuse, and since she wants to become stronger, he will be happy to help. The head of the Fenrir family steps up to Tiamat, leans in and whispers an offer in her ear, and her eyes narrow. She smiles at his suggestion and says that in that case we should start tomorrow. The elder still begs you not to kill him. The man standing next to him does not understand what is happening, but he knows one thing for sure, that it somehow applies to him. The next morning the maid's single blow sends the main character flying. He falls to his knees, and the woman tells him to get up because they're not finished yet. Ryu turns at the maid's voice and realizes she's just a devil, remembering that the elder is studying with Karin and picturing the girl lying on the floor. Tiamat keeps scolding him, saying he can do things but wastes a lot of energy in his movements. She tells him to conserve his strength because he tires quickly and at the same time gives him a lesson with her hand. The maid continues, saying that with those powers he cannot defeat the dragon. The man is knocked back by the blow. He still manages to stay on his feet despite how hard it is, because he remembers Karin and Lear are doing their best and he can't give in to them. Determined to stay on course, he is sure to get stronger, yet it wasn't long before the maid sent him flying again. Later the woman says that's enough for today. The princess and the main character are relieved it's finally over and are both shaking, unable to stand. Tiamat isn't finished and tells them to run another 100 laps around the site. Both are surprised it's not the end of the workout. After a while, Rue and the princess enter the dining room. They have no strength left for anything and are very exhausted from training. The maid behind Lear and Karin says she will start monitoring their nutrition today. She added that she does not accept objections and will be back soon. In Karin and Lear, the men look unwell, and the protagonist and the princess ask if they are all right, but neither knows how to answer. They share a look, and Ryu admits even he finds it hard to bear, while the girl says the man's endurance surprised her. A few days later, princess, he attacks the man who keeps dodging. After one wrong move, Ryu grabs her hand, immobilizes her, and pins her to the floor so she cannot escape. The protagonist admits he's tired, while the princess insists she can continue. Lear and Karen watch the training from the sidelines. The girl's grandmother tells her she moves too simply. Before attacking, she should think over her movements. Now it's Ryu's turn, and he listens to the maid's criticism, as she says he moves well but reacts too slowly, and it might still work with the princess. If the enemy moves much faster, he will be in trouble, and he is asked to always closely monitor the enemy's movements. Ryu scratches his head awkwardly and says reluctantly that since she told him to do exactly that, he has no choice. Tiamat cuts him off and assures him that everything is quite simple. He must sense the opponent's mana to know where she is heading and when to attack or retreat, and this skill gives him a much clearer read of the battle, so he can predict where she will strike. Even after the maid explained, the man still didn't understand. She sighed heavily and said it was hard to explain in words. Then she asks whether he felt any pressure when facing a strong opponent. He remembers their first meeting with the king and the ominous aura he felt then. She sees he remembered the feeling and says that's good since he already has an idea, then offers to review and reinforce what he learned while she unbuttons her shirt. He doesn't understand what she's doing while she covers her eyes with her hands to avoid seeing anything unnecessary. He tells her to stop, then realizes something or someone is blocking the sun. Pulling his hands away, he sees a massive dragon blocking the sun. The princess's grandmother turns into a dragon and tells him that from now on he will only fight her in that form, and he can hardly believe it. She asks him to defeat her and says he can use any weapon. Ryu discovers that Tiamat will join the fight. A girl steps closer and tells him he can attack her after the guy dodges her grandmother's attacks, and the guy is shocked and says it is too cruel. Tiamat tells him the main character only has himself to blame for choosing her as his teacher. The elder says the real training begins now and instructs him to get ready. The maid flicks her tail and announces they are starting. A hit from the dragon's tail sends it some distance away. Such a rapid advance surprised him. Disguised as a dragon, a woman asks what the matter is and warns that the dark dragon's attacks will be many times stronger, but the hero snatches his sword from his chest and says he knows himself. Suddenly a girl runs out from behind and asks him not to forget her. The man is caught off guard and steps aside. The princess then tries to attack her grandmother. Circling the dragon, she tries to confuse her. Ryu stands aside, unsure what to do. Forced to dodge their blows, he knows that if he tries to approach a girl and her grandmother will attack him immediately. Seeing Ryu standing lost in thought and not moving, Tiamat shouted that reflection was impossible during a fight, accused him of forgetting their conversation, and reminded him to feel the mana. Those words brought the man to his senses, and the maid then covered the field with dust and told him he could not beat his opponent by relying only on his eyesight. Later on, his strength is almost gone. Breathing heavily, he fights to stay balanced and avoid falling. Struggling, he tries to focus on the opponent. The dragon looks at him, thinks this might really be his limit, and admits that for a human he did pretty well. She remembers her recent talk with Fenrir. The Fenrir family head told the maid that Ryu might be the right person. At present the woman has not noticed any outstanding abilities in the main character, and Annie thinks the elder may have been mistaken in his proposal. After a moment the boy's aura shifts, and the elder and the dragon, like his expression, sense the protagonist's power and realize something in him has changed. A satisfied grin appears on the head of the Fenrir family, and the maid decides it's worth a try. She provokes Ryu into a conflict by taunting him that this is the best he can do. The eager princess flies into the attack, seeing a great opportunity for herself, while Tiamat presses on and asks the main character whether she should just kill him. Surprised by the words, the girl stops because she does not understand what her grandmother means. However, the dragon says that in his current state, the man will still die at the hands of the dark dragon. She can end his life without causing needless suffering. Tiamat bent her head over the man, looming above him. The maid disguised as a dragon declares this is the main character's end, as he stands at the bottom beside her. Standing apart from the man, the princess asks her grandmother to stop. Ryu still doesn't understand why things turned out that way, since he had been desperate to catch up with his friends, and the main character can't accept that all his efforts were in vain. A hand rests on his shoulder. His behavior changes instantly, and he says he will not accept this and will fight to the end, refusing to give up easily. Sensing his determination, the maid kicks, sending up so much dust that visibility drops to zero, and the gust almost knocks the princess off her feet. He realizes the dragon's leg is only a couple of centimeters from his body, and now he understands. Thanks to Manner, he briefly saw the blow's path because dust hid everything past his hand, and that glimpse let him dodge the strike and survive. He realized he could now sense the opponent's mana, and when the maid returned to human form, she congratulated him for finally feeling it. She wants to know how he views a woman's acting, and she hopes the main character did not think she would really kill him. The man sighs with relief and says that's how it was, while Tiamat adds he cannot say everything was a game. The words leave the man stunned, and the maid says that despite everything, the main character handled the ordeal and asks him to accept her congratulations, making him blush as he thanks the princess's grandmother. The princess stood a little apart from them, waving her arms and making a scene as she explained to her why she hadn't known anything about it, and they kept training until she passed the test too. Tiamat tells his granddaughter not to be so selfish and to stop acting up, but the main character interrupts their conversation to say the princess failed the test too. Both the grandmother and the granddaughter turn to him in bewilderment, not understanding his words and waiting for him to explain. The man points to a button on his vest that was about to fall off. He says the girl still hurts him and asks whether it was true that her task was to sleep with him. Holding her hand to her head, the maid says that formally that was the case. Even so, she tells her the princess has passed, and the girl can't believe it, her eyes lighting up with happiness. Beaming at her small victory, the girl is patted on the head by the main character, who says the princess did well, and she is pleased by Ryu's praise and laughs that she passed naturally because he could too. Lear and Karin stood slightly apart, watched the fight the whole time, called it amazing and offered to eat together to celebrate, and when the main character saw the girls he called out their names joyfully. Tiamat stands a little apart, watching quietly and enjoying their conversation. Later that night, the elder and Tiamat drank together, something the head of the Fenrir family never expected would happen again. Their faces are barely visible in the dim, cozy room, and he remembers the old days when they couldn't stay quiet for a minute, while a maid just laughs and says at least they always had something to do. The elder asks the woman how her training with the main character is going. The match nods and says it's absolutely fine and that Ryu is making progress. The elder laughs with pride at the guy and then says he never thought the match would be able to afford a man. The woman admits she never expected to train anyone, while the head of the Fenrir family says one day the protagonist will defeat them too. She pauses, says that anything is possible, and is glad the little lady follows the example of reusing things. She continues to wonder whether she can marry the princess to Mr. Ryu, and the elder chokes at the astonishing news as he starts making coffee. He asks Tiamat whether she is drunk or unwell, and reminds her that marrying the dragon princess to a human is not a reasonable decision and cannot happen. She grins and says it's not easy, but it's not impossible either. If the main character becomes stronger than them, others will recognize him. Mr. Ryu is the right person, as he said. The elder sighs, agrees with the woman, and says someone he knows had a hand in it. The Fenrir family head frowns, then says an ordinary person cannot have that kind of power. He still wonders why Ryu is the one. Many have already tried to gain his power through a contract, and each of them died a terrible death. Tiamat grows serious and says the choice is still his, and no one can stop him. If he finds out about the main character, they'll be in serious trouble, because Ryu has gained a power no one has yet mastered. The elder asks whether anyone else knows about this. The woman says she doesn't think so, since he has been missing for many years, then asks the elder how they finally met him. The Fenrir family head promises to tell her everything when the time comes, because Ryu has a hidden power nobody knows about. Training with Miss Tiamat became a duel. The man charged, told her to take his blow and knocked the maid back, but she stayed on her feet. After their fight, Tiamat says Mr. Ryu has grown much stronger. Mr. Ryu asks the woman if that is true. She confirms and says his skills have really improved. She is amazed at how fast he has developed, and the man cries out in joyful surprise and asks again if it is true. Proud, he knows he's reaping the rewards of his hard training and may be able to injure the dark drag. Tiamat announces that because his results improved, there will be no training tomorrow. The woman looks happy, but the man looks indignant. He does not understand the cancellation and asks his teacher about it. She tells him he trains every day and his body is exhausted, so rest will help more now than ever, and rest is part of the workout. She tells the elder and asks why he isn't spending time with Lear and Karin. Meanwhile, the girl has staged a duel, and the head of the Fenrir family watches from a short distance. He likes the idea and agrees, remembering they never managed to walk around the city and thinking they should see the sights. The next morning in Mr. Ru's bedroom, he sleeps peacefully but senses someone else in the room. As he sleeps, a voice calls his name and tells him to wake up, and unsure who it is, he reluctantly opens his eyes to see the person. Ryu opened his eyes fully and saw Lear standing over him telling him to wake up, and he was surprised the girl had come in person. Lear ignores his questions and just hurries him, saying Karin is already waiting for them and asking him to get dressed faster. He promised the girls he would go for a walk with them today. Later in the main shopping area, people go about their errands and are not in a hurry. The heroes are there too. He asks the girls where they should go. Karin pauses, and Lear says he does not know the city, so Karin has no suggestions about where they could go. Remembering that Karin had been looking at the ribbons, the main character suggests they go to the store. The girl can hardly believe it and asks if it's true. Lear says it's a great idea. Ryu looks back and asks the other person whether she agrees with his proposal. After that, he adds the address, Princess. The young woman looks pleased she went with the guys. In a proud pose, she rests her hands on her hips and smirks. She agrees and says she'll show them around since they don't know the city, and they'll be grateful to her. Ryu did not expect to go for a walk with the princess, and he remembered his earlier conversation with Tiamat during training. Stunned, he asks the woman again whether she really intends to take the princess with her. The girl's grandmother, with a serious expression, says he understood everything correctly and explains she was asked to attend the meeting. There is no one to look after the princess, so she asks him to do it. The main character then asks about the other servants, and the woman tells him they cannot control the princess's violent temper. Her encouragement that he'll be fine helps in this nervous time, but even after Miss Tiamat spoke, he would still fly if anything happened to the young lady, and the princess asks them all to follow her for inspiration. When they arrive at the jewelry store at this time, the seller bows to them and no one else is in the shop. After greeting them, he asks whether they want help picking pieces, and the young woman explains she brought her friends because they want to buy jewelry. Karin's eyes sparkle with happiness as she admires the jewels in the window. Lear does the same and is surprised by how much jewelry is on display. Lion Karen looked happily at the jewelry. Suddenly, she noticed the princess gazing at the girls. Suddenly, Ryus asked the girl if she would like to go see the bright decorations together. Startled, the princess flinched. Turning away, she said haughtily that she was a princess and had everything. Ryu smiled and added that girls like jewelry. The princess looked at the young man in silence, then asked permission to ask him something. Ryu was surprised but said nothing. The princess, her face serious, asks the young man why he wants to become stronger. Ryu is surprised and cannot say a word. He says the girl asked him about it so suddenly. The princess told him to answer simply. Scratching his cheek, he says he wanted to be on par with his friends and smiles awkwardly. He says they both got rare martial professions, but he wasn't as lucky and fell behind, so he wanted to get stronger. The princess asks whether this means the young man wanted strength because he has the same unsuccessful profession as hers. Suddenly, Ryu starts talking about a mentor. Surprised, the princess asks what this means and whether it's really just the mentor's doing. She screams, asking whether she really lost to an ordinary mentor. Ryu shouted that he had been training hard. He says he only gained power because of the latter. If he had not met Lear, he would have stayed a simple shepherd and never seen other countries, and the surprised princess asks about them. She asks Ryu where he's been, what the people are like, and whether they'd have fun. Ryu said he hadn't traveled much and had only been to one country. Ryu said the girl is a princess and asked if she doesn't have to travel much. The princess refused. She said she had never left the empire. Ryu was stunned. Clutching her dress, the princess said her title prevented her from leaving the country and made her feel trapped, as if in a cage. Ryu met the girl's gaze and said he understood her. The princess grew angry and asked the young man what he meant. Screaming, she demanded to know what this meant and whether the young man was also part of their royal family, and she asks if he really thinks she is so easy to figure out. With a sweet smile, Ryu said he was exactly like the princess. He never left his village and learned everything from his friends. Watching them travel freely made him envious. When they came back with souvenirs, his jealousy grew. He asks the stunned princess whether she truly feels the same. She was surprised. She suddenly screamed that it was exactly like that, but her parents and grandmother always take care of the princess, and even custody has its limits, so she wants to see the world and visit every country. She wants to find a place no one has seen, earn praise from others, meet different people, and try different foods. She also mentions one more thing and, sounding confused, says it is possible to find friends. She can handle everything on her own, but it is not that simple. Ryu thought she was trying to make friends with them. Suddenly, he called Karin and asked him to look at the new ribbons they had just chosen. Did you ask the girl if she had already chosen the ribbons? He said the ribbons suited her well. Karin asked the young man if they really looked cute. Turning to the princess, she asked what she and Ryu had been talking about. The girl flinched at the unexpected question. Turning away, the princess said sheepishly that it was nothing special. Smiling, Ryu said the princess really wants to be friends with them. The girl looked confused and panicked. The girl screamed and demanded to know who had allowed him to say such a thing. Karin was stunned to hear it. Karin asked with a questioning face whether they were already friends. The princess was very surprised. The princess asked Karin what she meant. Karine paused and said they eat together and train together too. Delighted, she asked whether that meant they were already friends. The princess shouted that this was certainly not the case. Karin says her dad, and her sister are family, but she'd be happy to make friends, asks whether the princess would like to be friends with her, and the girl was very upset. Startled by the question, the princess stepped back from the girl and tried to explain herself. At that moment, Ryu and Lior exchanged glances and smiled. Ryu said she'd also be happy if they became friends. Lior didn't really sigh and said she didn't have many friends either. Our Karine wore a serene expression. The princess looked slightly tense. The princess screamed that she agreed to be friends with them and that they could even call her by her first name. Karin was delighted and said they should pick a ribbon for a rake too. The princess looked surprised, asked about the ribbon, and said she already had one. Karine smiled, took the girl's hand, and told Okada to come with them. It will prove their friendship. She asked the stunned girl if that was really what friends did, and Oka looked very surprised before pressing her lips together. Oscar replied positively as Ryu and Lear stood to one side, and Lear smiled, saying they seemed to be having a lot of fun, while Ryu added that it was good they had become friends quickly. Suddenly Ryu asked Lear why she had not bought anything, saying they also had money from selling materials, so she should not be shy. He offers her a necklace with a pretty pendant and asks if she can wear it. Lear says the chains look like a collar and she does not like them. The girl says sadly that she would only get in the way in battle. The young man offers to treat her. Ryu suddenly looks away, surprised. Draping a scarf over the lyre, he asks if the scarf looks right. Surprised, the girl asks if it is really a scarf. Ryu says if wearing it around the neck is inconvenient, a girl can tie it on her arm. It also suits Lear's black hair. Ryu says if a girl doesn't like it, they can watch something else. Lear says everything is fine. Suddenly Lear smiles and thanks Ryu from the bottom of his heart. After a while, a group of men leave the shop and the seller thanks them for their purchase. The girls ask Ryu where they will go next, and Lear asks about other popular shops. The princess asks them to follow her. She smiles and says she's sure they'll like it. Suddenly the princess stops. Ryu asks the girl what happened. The princess is surprised. Looking up, she sees a huge dragon in the sky that grins and stares straight down at Ryu's group. A maid suddenly appears before Ryu. He recognizes her as Mrs. Tiamat and asks what happened. Tiamat gives them a serious look and says they have problems. Lady Tiamat says the seal in the cave of the Dragon of Darkness has weakened too much, and it looks like he will break out sooner than they expected, so you got scared and asked what it meant. Tiamat said preliminary forecasts showed he would break out today, so they should prepare thoroughly. Ryu was stunned and panicked, then asked whether it would really be today. Silence fell and someone asked if it was really starting. You frowned and thought it was too sudden, but there was no other choice. Turning to Mrs. Tiamat, he asks if he can see the seal, and the girl agrees, saying she was looking for them. She suggests going back to the castle, then they'll all head to the cave together. At that moment, a wall split open in a vast dark cave. The monster's tail darted across the stone floor. The monster grinned and said he would be free soon. A bright flame burned in his eyes. He was pleased that his desires would soon be fulfilled. A huge dragon flew across the bright clear sky. Lear said it seemed the long-awaited hour had come. Karine was serious and agreed at once. Ryu tensed up. Turning to Lady Tiamat, he asked whether the girl had already fought the dark dragon, and she looked very surprised. Miss Tiamat said she was too young to fight then, but her relatives could, and he was very strong. You might think that even Tiamat would find this dark dragon a formidable opponent, and he wonders if he can really handle it. Ryu tensed and Tiamat noticed. Ms. Tiamat told Ryu not to clutter his mind with unnecessary thoughts. Despite being human, the young man is not weak at all. He has achieved a lot during this time. She tells him that if he cannot believe in himself, he should believe her. Tiamat confidently told the young man to believe in himself because he is strong. Ryu was startled at first, then he agreed confidently. The princess grabbed his head and said she would try too, since she couldn't take all the credit herself. Ryu said he didn't need it. After a while, they reach a huge dark cave where many magicians are gathered deep inside, using magic to form a seal. A man suddenly appeared and asked the magicians what was happening. The male magician called him the emperor. Ryu asked Ms. Tiamat who those people were, and she said they were the Empire's spellcasters who feed the seal with magic, so it lasts longer. The man shouted that the seal was failing, and another caster said the dragon would awaken in a few minutes. Approaching the casters, the emperor said he accepted the information. They told him to leave the rest to them. A strange black liquid then began to flow between the stones. The next moment the seal collapsed, and everyone was horrified and stunned. Even the emperor could not contain his emotions, and the magicians were shocked by the destroyed seal. The emperor ordered everyone to evacuate at once because the dragon was about to break out, and the whole cave started to shake. A strange liquid started pouring harder and harder from the crack. Then someone said he had waited for this day for so long. Lear, Karin, and Ryu were stunned. Suddenly, a massive three-headed dragon stood before them, its body covered in strange markings. Scanning the crowd, he said there were dragonites and Fenrir. The dragon saw a man among them and asked if the young man was really a hero. Surprised, Ryu asked what it meant and tried to say he was not a hero, while the emperor ordered his men to prepare for battle and keep their guard up. The dragon dismissed them as annoying insects, said he was not interested in any of them, then cast a spell. He orders everyone to leave, then a group suddenly appears with magical seals. The men screamed and demanded to know what it was. They were about to retreat. The next moment, the dragonite group in Fenrir disappeared. Ryu was stunned that they were all gone. Immediately, the princess and Lear called for their father and mother, and he returned to the dragon to ask where he had sent them. The monster said he had just teleported them to another dimension and now wants to fight them. It's all because they're this boys' band. He laughs and asks them to make him laugh. A massive wolf tried to smash the stone wall, but a large chunk of stone did not come loose. The man said he couldn't get through. Grandma Lear said it looked like dragon magic had created the space. The girl replied that the magic was very powerful. The emperor said we need to hurry because Lear is there alone. The man told the wolf to take his time. They trained hard for this day because they would cope. We need to figure out a way out of here now. A black snake crawled across the ground. The blonde-haired girl shouted to the man to be careful. Suddenly the man dodges and the snake strike misses. The man looks down at the ground where many dark snakes crawl. The man called these snakes creatures of darkness. Surrounded, they knew the situation could not be worse and that the dark dragon had wasted no time. At that moment, the massive dark dragon was charging a magical attack in his seal and casting a spell. Without warning, a huge amount of dark liquid burst from his mouth. The young man dodged nimbly. Surprised, the dragon said the young man had dodged again. It ordered him to stop running and attacking. Ryu shouted he didn't need to be asked twice. Rushing at the dragon, he struck it. Ryu was surprised the dragon couldn't dodge. The monster had deliberately put itself under attack, and a strange liquid appeared behind the young man's back. Lady Tiamat shouted at Ryu to be careful because he can summon dark creatures from blood. A dark snake appeared suddenly. Miss Tiamat warned Ryu not to attack without thinking, or he'd be at a disadvantage. Clucking, he said he understood what Miss Tiamat meant since you had chopped up the snake, the creature of darkness. Tiamat realized the dark dragon had grown far stronger, and even a scratch on his arm would let him spawn creatures of darkness. If he is not killed with a single blow, the situation will be dire, and they will be overwhelmed by numbers and all die. Miss Tiamat stared at the young man and realized they had to rely on his strength in this situation. The next moment, the dragon launched a magical attack and asked if that would do. He's casting a powerful spell. Swinging his sword at him, Ryu tried to say they were still together but didn't have time to finish. Many magical seals formed around the dark dragon, leaving Ryu, Alika, Karin, and Lear stunned and frightened. A massive attack by several seals rushed straight at Ryu's groups. The latter said in surprise that they couldn't avoid such an attack at all, and he had just woken up, so it wasn't clear where he had gotten so much strength. The dragon asked the people what was wrong and whether they had come to kill him. Ryu thought doing nothing would kill them, but attacking would only create more creatures of darkness, so he doesn't know what to do. Miss Tiamat called to Ryu, warning him not to rush and telling him to think through the plan and do what he could. Mrs. Tiamat thought about it. Although Ryu and the others had grown stronger, they still lacked combat experience, and she hopes the Emperor and the rest will return in time. Until then, she must protect them. Suddenly, Princess Oka appears and says you only need to kill the shadows with a single blow. Smiling, she places a hand on her chest and tells everyone to give it to her. Reborn as a dragon, the girl says she will just kill him before he activates the spells. Mrs. Tiamat then shouted to Asuka to wait. Aluka suddenly transforms into a dragon. Ryu spots a tiny, cute dragon and realizes it is Aluka's dragon form. Oka lunged straight at the dragon, shouting that the dragon was finished. At that moment, Lady Tiamat transformed into a dragon as well. The dark dragon suddenly grinned, called it stupid, then activated the magic seal and the oaks froze in midair. She realized the massive dark dragon was using silent magic. Terrified, Ryu calls out Shoutsoki's name. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupts. Oka brushes dust from her eyes, then her eyes snap open and she freezes. Tiamat's body lay before her, and the girl was unconscious with no signs of life. Ryu shouts Tiamat's name while Yuka trembles with fear, and the dark dragon sneers that Tiamat sacrificed herself for others and calls it sheer stupidity. He swept Tiamat aside with his tail and told her to go away. Wonka quickly called her grandmother and flew to her body. At first Tiamat thought she couldn't move and assumed it was a paralysis spell, and now she realizes she must get up. The dark dragon asks whether they can really call themselves heroes. The previous hero was far better than them. Laughing, he asks them to try to make him laugh. Lear, Kareen, and Ryu were tense. They didn't know what to do now. A huge dark snake lunges from the side straight at the massive wolf, but the wolf pins it to the ground and destroys it. He told the other wolves that everyone was stepping on them and that there was no end to them. The man believes it's bad. They arrived too late. You and the others need to hurry. He knows he must come up with something fast before it's too late. He mentally urges Ryu and the others to hold on as long as possible. The huge dark dragon praised his opponents and ordered them to attack him. Oko tried to bring her grandmother to her senses, asked her to hold on, and kept calling her grandmother. At that moment, the dark dragon said removing the interference might make you serious again. The main character shouted Ahaka and Tiamat's names, and the princess spun around to see a magical attack coming straight at them. Akka snuggled up to Tiamat and squeezed her eyes shut. There was a huge explosion. After a while, Akka opened his eyes and saw Ryu and Lefir in the dust, Ryu holding the dagger in front of him and tensing up. Akka looked at the young man and the girl, frightened, and was about to say something when Ryu shouted for the girl to calm down. Ryu turned to Osuka and told her to remember why she was here. Osuka admitted she was to blame for Grandma getting hurt. Ryu said that if the girl died, Tiamat would cry because all her attempts to protect her had failed. With a confident look, Ryu said that all hope now rested on them, so Tiamat defended them with all her might. Odiko was very surprised. Ryu smiled and asked the girl to fight alongside him. Ryu called out to Alinka again. The girl looked surprised. Moments later, Tiamat woke and tried to speak, and Oka reassured her grandmother she would not do anything rash again. Oka joined Lear, Karin, and Ryu and said they would all fight together from now on. They were determined. The dark dragon laughed, saying he was very pleased with their pathetic attempts and ordered them to show everything they could. He then stretches out his hand, covered in a huge number of magic seals, while Ryu's group heads straight toward the dark dragon. You jumped from side to side, dodging the monster's attacks, while Kareen stood beside the dragon, prepared to strike, and then focused a massive amount of her power straight at it. The dark dragon reactivated the magic seal, grinned, said the girl had really decided to attack it with fire, snapped his fingers, added they'd get rid of her first, and began casting a spell. A magical seal appears under the girl and huge dark tentacles emerge from it. She notices them at once, and Ryu shouts to Karin to be careful. Trying to dodge, the girl flew the other way, but dark tentacles closed in on her. One of the tentacles reached for Karin's leg, but Lear cut it with her paw, saving Karin from death. Lear landed and asked Kareen if she was okay. Kareen was delighted and gratefully thanked her sister for saving her. The dark dragon grinned and said they would try to attack next. Ryu and Ojuka charged straight at the monster. Okusha shouted she would not let the dragon do this. The dark dragon immediately activated a magic seal right in front of itself and blocked the attack from Ryu and Oki's. The dark dragon dismissed the attack as useless. It launched a wide, sweeping strike. Oeka and Ryu tried to dodge. Ryu and Agoka jumped aside and became serious. Ryu froze, unsure what to do and feeling very tense. Ryu believed Tiamat had warned him to avoid using his spells at all costs. Simple attacks will not hurt him, and from his wounds he will summon creatures of darkness. Ryu cannot see how they can defeat such a monster. The dark dragon is distracted by Karin, Lear, and Orinka's return to the fight, while Ryu tries to recall his TMI training and watches Lyra's battle closely, convinced the dragon must have a weakness. The next moment the dark dragon grinned and dust swirled around him. Ryu suddenly had an epiphany and stared intently at the dragon. He thought that if he used magic reading, it might help. The dark dragon's tail ornament lit up suddenly, and Ryu was terrified, watching carefully as he activated the magic seals. A magic seal appears on the ground, but Lear evades it, and Oka also fights with him. You thought it couldn't be true, but if it was, there was no choice, so he pulls out a pen, turns to Lear and Korin in his mind, and says he has a question for them. Explaining his plan, he leaves Lear and Karin very surprised, and they ask what the young man is talking about, and Lear says that if they fail he must know whether the young man understands how dangerous it is. Ryu is sure they can handle it together. If anything happens, he is confident they can protect the young man. Lear and Karen were taken aback. Ryu says he believes in them and wants to try to carry out this plan. Lear clenches her fangs, says she understood, and suggests they do it. Karin says she will try too. Akka says she'll try too, but Ryu interrupts and asks Okuda to listen to him. The dragon asks whether they have decided to act, and whether they are really sure he would allow it, activates the magic seal, says it is not like that, and casts a spell. Lear suddenly jumps up and finds himself right beside the dark dragon. The dragon thought Lear had broken the spell. Smiling, he says it's some kind of fast dog, but can't dodge in the air at all, then activates the magic seal and aims it at the liars. A magical flow appears around the dark dragon, completely surrounding it. Surprised, the dragon asked if they had really limited the scope to the guard's flame, then looked around, smiled, and said they were fools only playing into his hands. Looking up, he sees Oroka emerge from the open space and charge straight toward the dark dragon. Crashing headfirst into the dark dragon's body, Akka sways, confused. The geared flame should have worked but didn't. He looks at Odika and expects only her bones to remain. He notices a feather in her mouth protecting her. Some time earlier, when Ryu turned to Osuka, Astrid had taken Karin's pen. That pen keeps Osuka from taking fire damage. He has kept the feather safe, so Osuka does not have to worry. Ryu told Uguka the dark dragon's magic is strong, but you only need to stop the dragon from activating it. He also explained where his magic came from. The dark dragon tapped the ground and said it was very interesting. He asked whether they had really decided to attack him again. Grinning, the dark dragon says he'll send her to his grandmother. The monster activates the magic seal. Oka smiles and says the only fool here is the dark dragon. Moments later, the dark dragon feels a sharp pain and looks away to see his severed tails. Lear cut off the dark dragon's tail with her sharp claws. Ryu said the dark dragon's magic comes from its tail. The dark dragon saw they had planned all this from the start, laughed, and said he understood everything, then asked whether they thought they could take his magic. The severed tail suddenly distorted, and a swarm of dark snakes poured out, and the dark dragon sent them forward, saying his creatures would deal with them. Laughing, he said they needed to move forward and ordered Ryu and his team to cheer him up a little more. He pushes them to fight harder and harder until they reach their limits. That's exactly what he wanted. Startled, the dark dragon pauses, bewildered. He looks around and realizes something is wrong and someone is missing from the group. A sudden memory of Ryu makes him realize the hero isn't here. He watches Lur attack the dark dragon, but the dragon dodges. The dragon suspects Ryu is really up to something. It shouts at the hero, demanding to know where Ryu is and to see him. A moment later, Ryu steps out from behind the lyre and says he is here. A grin spreads as his blade starts to glow. The dark dragon stares at his glowing blade and realizes he has infused it with magic. All this time, he has been gathering magical power. Grinning, the dark dragon says this is what he has been looking for so long, and he was looking for a real hero at this moment. Ryu screams, threatens the dark dragon, and then attacks the dark dragon. As the young man's blade strikes the dragon's body, a massive explosion erupts. A sudden, powerful gust of wind nearly knocks Karen and Lyra off their feet. Alaka sees a huge plume of air and smoke from the explosion and strains to make out the main character and the dragon. The next moment, the dust clears to reveal a dark figure lying on the ground, unconscious but still showing signs of life. Oka, Lear, and Karina watched the scene intently while Ryu looked at the dark dragon's body and suddenly asked whether they had really won. Ryu realizes the dark dragon's head shows no sign of life and turns to see Lear, Karina, and Akka standing nearby. Rushing to the young man, the girls rejoiced that they had won and pulled it off, while everyone kept happily saying they had defeated the dark dragon. Ataka headed straight to Tiamat and shouted that she would help her now. At that moment, when you noticed something inside the dark dragon's body, he began to move his lips and twitch slightly. The dark dragon admitted it was a strong punch and incredible power, and even Ryu managed to defeat him, the dragon of darkness. He asks what he should receive as a reward for his efforts. The dragon calls the young man a hero and says his knowledge of magic will be enough. Ryu wonders whether the dragon will really stop fighting. Ryu tells the dark dragon he did not fight it for the reward. Ryu asks the dragon to explain his goal and why he wanted to fight the hero so much. A dark dragon lay on the ground and said he only wanted to fight a strong opponent. He only wanted to see how strong he was, and to do that he needed a worthy opponent since people came here in drove. No one could hold out for long, and the dark dragon realized only a hero could match him. Everyone grew afraid of him, even the heroes, so they decided to seal him. Ru, Lear, Oka, and Ryu were stunned. With the last of his strength, the dark dragon said he only wanted to find someone who could match his strength. The dark dragon also says being born with great power is a true curse. The young man is surprised by those words. Ryu remembered his comrades saying they had become much stronger and were going on a journey, Since he could not fight, he had to stay in the village, and Ace said goodbye and told him to take care of the animals. Clenching his fist, Ryu thought about the dark dragon's loneliness. The dark dragon asked what was wrong and demanded the young man tell him what he wanted, and when nothing came to mind, he told the young man to finish him off, but you interrupted and said you had already decided everything. Smiling, he addresses the dragon of darkness, points to himself, and invites it to be friends. Lear, Oka, and Karin were surprised, and even the dark dragon was surprised. Lear shouts at Ryu and asks what he is carrying. The dark dragon asked the young man what he meant. Ryu said he understood him better than anyone else. With great power, the dark dragon felt very lonely. Ryu slumped a little and put his hand on his chest. Lear and Karin looked at Ryu sadly, and the young man walked up to the dragon and said they had defeated him. Ryu extends his hand to the dragon lying on the ground and says they are equals, offering friendship to the dark dragon. Ryu smiles and asks the dark dragon to grant his wish. The dragon falls silent in surprise and is about to answer when Osaka interrupts and says she is against it. Oscar said the dark dragon had killed many people and injured her grandmother, so she refuses to be friends with such a creature. If they forgive him, the dark dragon could start killing again. She points at the dark dragon's reclining head. Ryu said that after listening to his story, he realized the dark dragon would no longer kill. Oka was about to speak, but Tiamat interrupted her. Checking her body, the woman says they defeated the dark dragon, and the spell came off her. Odeka rejoices and rushes into his grandmother's arms. T told Ryu that in the world of monsters, only the strongest survive, so the choice is Ryu's. Ryu thought it over and said that if the dark dragon turned evil again, they could defeat him, and since they could defeat him now, they could do it again. Turning to Yuka, he says they may not trust him and asks whether she believes him, while Yuka tenses up. She remembers every moment with Ryu. Oka turns away and says she will agree only this once. If anything goes wrong, it will be on the young man's conscience. Ryu thanks the girl. Ryu turns to the dark dragon and asks for his answer, and the dragon laughs, saying it's a strange wish. Agreeing, he asks the young man to let him heal him, and a bright glow bursts from his hand as the dragon points at him. The dark dragon says it will prove their friendship. A bright glow then enters the young man's body. Ryu stands stunned when the dark dragon says he put a piece of his soul into the young man. The dragon disappears, saying they will see each other soon. Ryu is shocked by the dragon's sudden disappearance. His body buckled and the young man fell to the ground. Lear rushes straight to the young man. After a while, the young man regains consciousness. Lying on someone's lap, he realizes he passed out. Ryu wakes and asks where he is. The girl says he has finally woken up. Ryu is surprised to see her, and the girl smiles sweetly. Ryu says they haven't seen each other for a long time and asks whether she has already woken up. It turns out the girl recovered, and replies that she has but can only talk to the young man in this world. Ryu told the young man he was too reckless, then stood stunned. Bertessi said the young man kept nearly dying in the dragon fight and in training, and while wanting to get stronger isn't wrong, he's taking far too many risks. You understand what the girl said about training and realize was the one who gave him strength. The main character said he understood and would be more careful going forward. Smiled and said she was glad to hear it. Ryu said the dark dragon planned to put part of his soul into it. She agrees, saying that's exactly right and the egg is in that direction, then points straight at him. Ryu looked at the egg, asked whether it truly belonged to the dark dragon that is his soul, and said it looked beautiful. Smiled and said the dragon of darkness wasn't evil at first. Originally a golden dragon, he always sought new knowledge, but after learning forbidden magic, he became a dragon of darkness, ordinary in form yet with a very strong soul. Ryu said he understood everything. Adds that Ryu is very kind. Grins. She suggests Ryu may have spared the dark dragon because Yura is a dragon too. Ryu studies her closely, thinking he does not want to take anyone's life so easily. Will reply that this was why she liked the young man. Bert takes the egg and says he'll return to the subject. She asks you to take a closer look. The young man is surprised to see a small dragon inside the egg. Bert explains he is rebuilding his body inside it. You were asked whether he will ever come to life, and you agreed, telling the young man not to worry because she would look after this dragon. She told Ryu it was time to say goodbye. Ryu hesitated and began to interrupt her. Asked when he could leave the young man's body, was very surprised. Ryu said Yura has always been here alone, and he's sad to see how lonely she is. Yura said she is not lonely. Ryu feels very comfortable and safe inside, so she asks the young man not to worry. He asks if the girl will be able to come out if he becomes a demon lord. Gates is scared and shudders. She replies that she can get out. Rue is happy, but the girl says there is no need to do this. The powerful demon lord who commands other demons warns Ryu never to become one and suggests they end the conversation for now. Ryu asks the girl to stop. They smile sadly and say they will be able to talk to you later. The young man calls to the girl, but she does not hear. Ryu wakes up after a while to find everyone happily gathered by his bed, and Ms. Tiamat says she is glad he is okay. Rue appears surprised and asks where they are. Lear said that after Rue fell, they met their grandparents and everyone returned safely to the castle. Ryu realizes he must have been unconscious and thanks everyone for their help. Tiamat says the young man still hasn't fully recovered and should rest. Lear tells him to call her if he feels unwell, and Ryu agrees and tells the girls to rest too. Rue is left alone. The young man is glad Yura is okay. Yura seems to have forced him out of the dream. He doesn't understand why he shouldn't become a demon lord. Yura knew it was exactly like that. If Ryu becomes the demon lord, she will be able to leave this space. But with that power, the young man will be very lonely and will have to sacrifice all his friends. Thinking of Ryu, she asks whether the main character can handle it. Later, the city held a celebration. Everyone celebrated, eating, drinking, dancing, and singing. The crowd rejoiced at the defeat of the Dragon of Darkness. Everyone emptied their cups. Blessings were offered to the Dragon Emperor and Lord Ryu. Lear walked up to Ryu, smiling, and said the young man seemed very popular now. Ryu agreed and said people in the city weren't giving him a pass. Some time later, Ryu, Karin, and Lear reached the Emperor's palace. The Emperor asks the group to let him thank them once more. Asian. He says that without them, they would not have been able to defeat the evil dragon. The Emperor asks what she wants as a reward, and Ryu got scared and said he shouldn't. The Emperor smiles and tells the young man not to be shy, adding that he won't let them go without a reward, so they can ask for whatever they want. Ryu thinks that although the Emperor says this, he still does not know what to ask for and has no ideas. Ryu asks what he may ask for, and the Emperor replies that the young man may ask for anything his heart desires, such as treasures, artifacts, or the right to live in a palace. Ryu considers it. Miss Tiamat smiles, apologizes for interfering, and offers an idea about the reward. After a moment, she suggests the young man choose her as his reward, grinning as Ryu, Agaka, Lear, and Karin react in surprise and ask what she means. Lear asks whether Mrs. Tiamat really wants to be his wife. Karine asks whether Tiamat plans to marry Dad. Oka asks what Grandma is talking about. You laugh nervously and say the Emperor will certainly not agree to this. Suddenly, the Emperor and his wife say they do not mind at all. The Emperor asks Ryu what he'll say, since having a dragon as a wife would be nice, and Ryu looks confused, surrounded by his teammates. Panicked, the young man looks at Mrs. Tiamat and asks why she is doing this. Tiamat covers her mouth and asks what she said. Without warning, the Emperor asked the young man whether he really disliked the proposal. The Emperor asks if Ryu could take Lady Tiamat's claws. Surprised, Ryu asks the Emperor what he means by mentioning claws. The Emperor agrees and explains that dragon claws and scales are used to make powerful weapons and simple armor, and that these materials can strengthen their equipment. Maybe the young man wants something else. He tells the Emperor it will do, then turns to Lady Tiamat while the girl was laughing nervously. The Emperor said the young man would then receive the dragon claw's reward, that everything would be prepared and they could rest in the meantime. At that moment, Orica exhaled. After some time, Ryu trained with Lear and Karin, practicing with a blade. Lear asked you if he was okay. The young man wiped the sweat from his brow. Lear added that the young man had not yet recovered and might rest a little longer, but you said he was fine, so he should practice. Ryu thought the dark dragon still hadn't recovered. It's good that Yura is looking after him. The dark dragon needs to get much stronger to catch up with the heroes. Orica walked up to Ryu, gave him a bottle and a towel, and told Joyous to take them. The girl then asked whether the young man had really trained that much. Sadly, that's the only help she can offer. The young man thanks her, then watch closely as Ryu wipes his sweat. Ryu asks the girl what's wrong. She says there's nothing, and then asks what the young man will do when he gets the award. Ryu says he plans to look for his friends later, and asks Alaka what she would like to do. Oka suddenly becomes nervous, and asks the young man whether she can, if possible, join him and his companions. Ryu asks what the Emperor will say. Aka tells him not to worry because her father said it would be good for her to tell the world, and if they ask together, he will certainly allow it. She adds that if possible, she would go with them. Amazed, Ryu remembered the girl, saying she really wanted to travel. Oka thought she was a princess and believed she couldn't just leave the country, but she wanted to do it badly. Suddenly, Karin broke the silence. Karin is happy and says she agrees and has no problem traveling with her. Lear said they could not do that at all. Silence fell. Rue said everything was right and they could not make such an important decision alone. Ashika stayed silent. Rue patted the girl's head and told her not to worry because they would go with her. Ryu smiles and says they will definitely get the Emperor's permission, asking the girl to believe in him. Delighted, Oku clenched her fists and smiled as she asked if it was true. As they were about to go to the Emperor, a man interrupted and said the Emperor was calling them and that he would escort them to the throne room. After a while, the group reaches the throne room, where a huge table stands. The Emperor pulls a white cloth off the table and says this is the man's reward. 5 claws sat on the table. Rue was surprised by how many there were. The Emperor said Tiamat had explained that each claw had a different effect, so they had prepared several options. The Earth Dragon's claws are powerful, the Water Dragon's claws are flexible and graceful, and the Air Dragon's claws are light and sharp. There are special ones, the Emperor said. The young man is asked to choose any claws he likes. Ryu examines the claws and sees many different kinds of claws, so he does not know which one to choose. The claw catches his eye and he says he likes it. He thinks it's obvious right away that it's special and very comfortable in his hand. The Emperor smiled and said he had a diamond in his eye. He announces the claw is Tiamat. Ryu is stunned and asks whether he truly belongs to Tiamat. The Emperor says they were very lucky because the student chose the teacher's claw. Tiamat felt embarrassed and told the Emperor to stop. The Emperor snapped his fingers and said he had a better idea, then asks Ryu why he shouldn't take Tiamat with him, and Ryu and Tiamat are surprised. Aghaka, Karen, and Lear were surprised when the Emperor asked Tiamat if she enjoyed training with Ryu, and Tiamat said she was obliged to care for Mrs. Oke, so she had to refuse. Ryu notices Yuduka, very nervous, clutching the hem of her dress. Ryu smiled and nodded at the girl, her hand clenched into a fist. Osuka stamped her heel, turned to her grandmother and father, and said that if her grandmother did not want to go, she would like to go on a trip with Ryu. Having thought about it for a long time, she says she wants to see all the world's wonders herself and won't give up even if others oppose her. Boka bows and asks her grandmother and father for permission to go on a trip. Suddenly, people began whispering that Ms. Aka was still a child and that it was too dangerous. The Emperor says he understands the girl's feelings, but she is still too young and must wait a few more years. Suddenly, Tiamat says she must disagree. Aka fought the Dragon of Darkness and did well. Tiamat believes Aka has matured enough. She will be with you, and he's strong enough that there won't be any problems. She believes they should let Yuka go. Her grandmother's words surprised the girl. Tiamat turns to the young man and says she has one condition. She says Ryu must protect Oku during the journey, and if she is hurt, the young man will not escape any punishment to science, which could lead to an international scandal. Grandma asks the young man whether he is ready to take responsibility for Oka and looks very serious. Oka says Ryu doesn't have to agree to this because Ryu can protect herself. Tiamat said that in an earlier interview, Oka had shown the opposite. Turning to the reviewer, she says that if the young man cannot protect the lady, he cannot give consent, and he asks her to answer the question. Ryu falls silent, then says he will speak frankly but cannot promise it. Not knowing what could happen on the journey, he can't guarantee Okinawa will be safe. The girl becomes frightened. Ryu promised he would help her if anything happened, not because she was a princess, but because they were friends. They ask Ms. Tiamat to allow Akeka to travel with her friends. Ryu then bows. Mrs. Tiamat frowned, then smiled. She asked whether Ryu was really a friend of the princess, and Ryu panicked and admitted it. Lady Tiamat turns to the Emperor and asks what he will say and whether he will let Orika go. The Emperor smiled, said he could not refuse their benefactor's request, then agreed and told Aganka she could go on a trip. Oki's fist trembles and the girl beams, saying she will be able to tell the world. Ryu turns to Aka and tells him he is very happy. Aka thanks him. Mrs. Tiamat interrupts and says she has one condition. It means she goes with them. Ryu, surprised, asks Mrs. Tiamat. Oka, also surprised, turns to his grandmother. Tiamat said she never said she wouldn't let them go alone. Zimet said that if they caused trouble in another country, it could trigger an international conflict and also create problems for Mr. Ryu. Tiamat asked the young man to be understanding. Lear says she does not mind, and Karina says it will be more fun this way. Suddenly they asked Apaka what was wrong. She replied that she was simply glad to finally be free. The Emperor laughed and told her not to say that. Before they left, the man said he wanted to talk. The Emperor said he had a request for the young man. Ryu looked surprised and asked what the request was. The Emperor asks you if they can visit the elf village. Many spirits live in the elf forest, and he recently received a message from the Spirit King asking Rao to help with a case, which leaves Rao surprised and asking whether he really has to help. The emperor agrees, saying news of the Dragon of Darkness's death is spreading fast, and asks them to lend him their powers. People have begun kidnapping elves, and he asks that all poachers be caught. They capture spirits and sell the elves they captured as servants. Unable to appear in human settlements, he asks the young man for help. Ryu said he understood, since he is human too. Ryu thought he had asked a man he hated for help. The man doesn't mind helping, but he doesn't know what the others will say. He suddenly heard the girls telling Ryu to do his EC's fit. Lear says she's sure they all think the same way, and Oka wonders if this is not the best part of traveling, because it lets the young man do what he wants. Ryu agreed to go to the elf village. The emperor said he felt flattered that Ryu had decided to ask for his help and is very happy. Ryu realized he was meant to speak to the king of spirits himself. The emperor said the village elder would speak for him. The elven village was in the south of the great forest. Ryu said he understood, and they set off. Emperor Yuk wants her to have a great time traveling. Mom wished her good luck. Oka smiled, said goodbye to her parents, and noted that they had left. Everyone was very happy. After a while in the southern part of the great forest, the Ryu's group pushed through the thick undergrowth, and Ryu said it was hard to walk there because of the roots, while Tiamat replied that there are many large trees in this area. Approaching the elven village, the way ahead will get easier, and Ryu said he understood everything before turning to the others to say there was very little left. He looks at Agunka, who is breathless and clearly upset, and the girl says she is fine as she tries to steady her breathing. Tiamat told the girl to hurry up. If they kept going at the same pace, they would never get there. Tiamat asked the princess to treat it as a workout and to do her best, urging her on. Ryoko was upset. Ryu said it was tough. Ryu said this was his first time in this part of the forest. Miss Tiamat said that was fine. His spirits put up a barrier around the village so it could not be found. Lear said they could not get into the village. Guardian spirits stand around the barrier, and if they identify themselves, they will let them in. Ryu smiled and said it seemed they were already close. The young man looked surprised and glanced to the side. They saw the young man's small spirit. Ryu was very happy, and Kareen said it was the first time they had seen them. Ryu asked the spirit if he had really come to meet them. The spirit then suddenly pointed the way and flew there. You didn't know whether to go after him or what had happened. They couldn't tell where the spirit was flying at high speed. Tiamat said she didn't understand anything, and they began to move away from the village. Then the young man heard a voice. Suddenly someone attacked them. Even Lear and Ryu felt a little scared. Then they looked and saw a huge number of spiders. Tiamat said these monsters were called forest spiders. You could not tell where so many of them had come from, and Kareen turned to the young man and told him to look away while huge spiders attacked people. Ryu said he had to help them. They quickly took care of a bunch of spiders. A spider attacked the young man, leaving him very shaken. Ryu asked if he was truly safe, and Lear said he had fainted. Tiamat said he did not seem to have any serious injuries. The spirit suddenly flew to the young man. Ryu said that was why he had brought them here, and then a voice came from the carriage calling for a man and asking if he could help. Elves were in the cage and asked the young man if he could let them out. Lear and Ryu were surprised to see the elves in the wagon. After a while they released them. The elves thanked the young man and said they could not reward him now. Ryu said he did not need anything and introduced himself as Ryu, saying he had come at the Spirit King's request. Agaka said everything was fine. Ryu said the spirit led them here. The elf is startled, then sees a spirit who asks her to be quiet and smiles. Later, people wake up confused to find they have been attacked by forest spiders. They ran shouting they didn't care about the elves because they had to get away to save their lives, clearly fleeing without thinking, and then suddenly found something on the ground. A sword catches his eye with an emblem that appears on everything. Tiamat said she had never seen anything like this before. They all appear to be from the same group, and that group is clearly large. Even the nobles may be members of this organization. Ryu says no further information is needed. They must go to the village to speak with the King of Spirits and escort the elves home. As they move through the dense forest, Ryu realizes the kidnapped elves are 4 women and 2 children, and the fact that even children were taken makes him dread what the captors might do to them. We must stop these poachers now and protect the elves and spirits. The elf girl says they're almost there. They just walk through the bushes and reach their home. Surprised, Ryu says this is an elf village. The little spirit flies away and Ryu says goodbye to him. An elf runs up to them and calls out to Helen. Pulling her into his arms, he says he's glad she's okay. She says she's in pain, and the elf says he was so worried when she was kidnapped. Do you understand that they are a family? Helen points to the young man and says he saved them. The man bows and thanks you for saving Helen. Ryu says no thanks are needed and that he only helped in a difficult moment. Helen calls her grandfather and says they came at the King of Spirits' request. The man asks whether that is true and then says the young man must be Mr. Ryu. He clears his throat and introduces himself as the village elder, Alrai Solon, and his granddaughter, Helen. Ryu is surprised the man is an elder and notices he looks no older than 20. He wonders whether elves age, then says he'll take them to the King of Spirits and asks the others to follow him. Soon they arrive at the house with a round table. Several people are already seated and only one chair is empty. The elder turns to the Lord and says Mr. Ryu has arrived at his request and they can now begin rescuing their kin, and Ryu asks if they want to discuss strategy. The elder agrees. Many of their relatives have been kidnapped by traders and are about to be sold into the ministry. He developed a plan to deal with them, and Ryu asked what it was. The elf elder said they would break into the houses of the nobles who had bought their brothers, free all the elves and spirits, and kill all the bad people. That's all. Ryu was stunned and asked what it all meant, then realized the plan was too simple, and Lear and Tiamat were just as surprised and amazed. Lear whispered to Ryu that he wondered if the elder was joking, and Ryu said he didn't think so. At that moment, Kareen told the elder it was a great plan, and Valka agreed, adding they could go kill everyone. They were already rushing into battle when Ryu suddenly grabbed both by the shoulders and ordered the girls to stop. He added that it was too reckless, and then asked how they find out which houses the elves will be in, and why they do not immediately break into the dealers of prohibited goods. The elf said the scouts they sent to the kingdom still haven't returned. Ryu said if they attacked the nobles would want revenge and strike the village. They need to think it over again, but the elf banged his fist on the table and said they didn't have that much time. Even now, their relatives are suffering at the hands of these ruthless people, and they endure this pain hoping to save them, unable to let them wait. The elves began supporting the speaker, and it was also hard for them, which explained why they were in such a hurry. They want to save the elves and spirits as soon as possible. Ryu purses her lips and says she needs to think about everything first. An indiscriminate attack could kill the elves and waste a lot of time. It would do more harm than good. The elder asked what they should do then. Ryu puts a hand to his chest and tells the elves he'll handle it. Posing as a buyer, he will visit the dealers of prohibited goods, and all the elves are surprised. Ryu says that when he sells, he will be able to get the necessary information, and he might even buy some of them outright, and the elder asked if it wasn't too dangerous. Okaz said that was all. He didn't know how much money the young man would need for it. Ryu says they just need to be earned. He'll get money by selling materials from hunting in the Great Forest, and he also has a small reserve from sales in the Dwarf Kingdom of about 60 gold coins. Turning to the elder, he asks whether there are dangerous monsters in the area and says he will be able to earn money from them, and the elder answers that there are many forest spiders here. They recently appeared in the forest and have begun reproducing rapidly. They've already suffered enough from them. Tiamat reminded the young man not to forget the monsters they had already defeated. Ryu agreed and said there would be no problems. Raising his hand, he announces they are beginning a mission to rescue the elves and will do their best. Deep in the forest, a spirit flew to another, who, seeing him, spoke. Turning to the young man, the spirit asked where he had been all this time, since it had been looking for him for a long time. It apologized and said it wanted to know a little about you. Then it warned that if the young man ran away that he might get into trouble. Then he asked the spirit how it felt. Putting on the mantle, the spirit says the King of Spirits found Ryu very interesting and is confident he can help their village. He says Ryu is a mentor, but also very brave and kind-hearted. Long ago, the Spirit King met a man to create a world between humans and spirits. The man agreed and suggested they sign a contract to use the spirit's power because it can help people in many ways. The spirit asks what advantage they have. The man said he would explain it now. He says that people have now forgotten the spirit's blessings and treat them as mere workers, and they can change this. Reading the letter, the King of Spirits thinks it over and realizes he appears to be the only one who still believes it. Later, Ryu killed several spiders and said he thought that would be enough. The elf wondered whether anyone would buy them, and Ryu replied they could be used in many ways. For example, the threads could make clothes, and he said they could go to the principality now, when suddenly an elder came up and called Ryu. The elder asked the young man to help their brothers because his daughter was among those abducted. Ryu was surprised and asked whether his daughter was among the abducted. The elder said many children, parents, and even orphans had been abducted. Still, each of them means a lot to him. All the elves bow and ask you and his group to bring them home. The protagonist agrees. The elder rummages in his pocket and asks the young man to accept something. The elder gives him a package. Ryu asks what kind of letter it is. The elder says the letter is from the King of Spirits and that the young man can give it to the principality's ruler. Ryu asks which ruler of the principality the young man means. Ryu asks what is in the letter. The elder tells him to hand it over. Ryu says yes and adds he may not be able to meet him but will try, and the elder thanks Ryu's group. Ryu and his team turn and walk away, and the elves give them the Spirit King's blessing. After a while, the girls asked Ryu what kind of principality Uruk was. He told Karin he didn't know the details, but it wasn't as strict there as in other countries. You don't need a card to enter. Miss Tiamat said the principality had also received the spirit's blessing. Oka looked surprised and asked whether they were really kidnapping elves and spirits to sell. Tiamat said it was probably someone's plan. First, gather information. When selling the spiders to the guild, they should talk with the people. Arriving in the city, Ryu asks whether this is really the principality of Ifruch and says he does not see anything special. They step into the guild and find it strangely lifeless. A young man pulls out the spiders and announces he wants to sell them. They hand him the money and ask him to count it. Ryu thanked him but felt a sense of déjà vu, then said they had received the money and someone called Ryu. It was Mac. The young man said they had not seen each other in a long time. Mac said he'd heard someone was selling rare materials, so he came to check it out. Mac had assumed the seller was a young man. Ryu was surprised. Aurka asked whether Ryu really knew the mechanic. Ryu agreed and said they had met in the land of the dwarves. Max said he could hardly believe he'd run into Ryu here and hadn't expected him to come at such a busy time, and Ryu looks surprised and asks what stressful time Max is referring to. Max suggested the young man might not know that the ruler had recently fallen ill, and Ryu was very surprised. Matt continued and said that in this country, anyone who signs a contract with the King of Spirits becomes the ruler. No one has been able to sign the contract, so people are very worried. Ryu said everything was clear. He wondered what it meant that the Spirit King and the current ruler knew each other. Maybe the letter refers to the future recipient. Mac asked you what he was doing here anyway. Surprised, the young man felt he could not tell Mac he had come to save the elves. Ryu said that after a village asked for help, he was searching for missing people. Mac, surprised, says Ryu is very kind. Ryu asks the young man if he has any information and if he's heard anything about servants in this country. Mac says it's nothing. He'd heard of a secret guild in this country that deals in illegal goods called the Black Wolves. A man said he remembered someone connected to the guild, and Ryu, surprised, asked if that was really true. Max said that once Ryu's group appeared, it would be hard to contact him. Ryu was surprised and asked what that meant. Max said dealers of prohibited goods are basically judged by their clothes, and by their appearance they can be mistaken for the poor. Ryu said he understood. NAC replied that once they had expensive clothes they could go straight to him, and there was nothing more he could do, so you thanked them. After a while the man waved and said goodbye. The girls grew worried and asked if everything would be all right. Karin called it inconvenient. Orica told the girl it suited her very well. Tiamat told everyone to behave like aristocrats and watch their words and behavior. The heroes wore dashing, expensive clothes. Ryu told the girls everything was fine and asked them to repeat everything. In the family, Ryu is the father, Tiamat is his wife, and Karin and Olteka are their daughters. He wants to say who will play Lear, but the girl screamed loudly and asked why she had to be an animal. Ryu said the problem was that the girl could not tuck her tail into her ears. Disguising herself as a human was very difficult. She was upset, so they decided to visit dealers of prohibited goods. Everyone agreed. A short time later, the group was met by the butler, who asked if this was really their first time. Ryu agreed and said his close friend Mac had recommended the man to him. The man said he understood. The man asked Ryu which servant they were interested in. Ryu was surprised. He hadn't even considered a purchase plan. Mrs. Tiamat suddenly interrupted and said he should do his housework well and look presentable, then asked about the kind of servants they had. The man said they should be allowed to show all their goods, so he asked them to follow him. Ryu turns to Tiamat, who waves her head. They walk down a long flight of stairs. Ryu asked the man what kind of servants they kept. The man said they had many servants. A man could not pay his debts. A former adventurer is involved, and the man is generally sure they will be satisfied. Valka whispered that it was disgusting. Ryu told her to be quiet. The band also said they still had half-humans, and Ryu asked if any were available. He agreed, said it was exactly like that, asked you if he was really interested, and offered to show them if they wanted. The man asked Ryu what race the man was interested in, maybe dogs or cats, and then Ryu suddenly asked if they had elves, which surprised the man. He stopped and leaned close to Tiamat, whispering that he wondered if he had really said something wrong. Tiamat replied that he might be starting to suspect. The man said he was very sorry. Unfortunately, they didn't have elves, he added. Rue was surprised. After a while, they reached the room, where the man says elves are valuable goods sold only at auction. Rue said he understood everything, which meant they couldn't be found at other merchants either. The man agreed and said it was much more profitable to sell them at auctions. The protagonist saw this as serious. Most problems could be solved with money or merchants, but auctions were different. Whoever had the most money won at auctions, and the elves would fetch a fortune. He knows they need to find where they're being held quickly. Ryu asks the man where the auction will be held. The man apologizes and says he cannot disclose that information. Ryu lays out a bag of gold coins and asks the man to tell him a little about elves in exchange for a modest gift. The man was very surprised. The man hands over a list of people put up for auction and asks the man not to share the information with others. Many of them are women and children. Lately, the Dark Guild has stepped up its efforts. He heard they recently captured a group of elves. Ryu realizes how many there are. If they want to free everyone, they must act carefully. Ryu suddenly spots where Ray Solon points at her, and the man says the client has a good eye. You realize she will be sold at auction in 3 days, and the headman asks you to save his daughter. Seeing the girl, he notices they share a last name and realizes she must be the elder's daughter. TM out-whispers to the young man that there is little time left before the auction, and they should hurry. Ryu agreed. Ryu says that means there will soon be a chance to get real treasure, then asks why elves are worth so much, and the man replies that he does not know. Suddenly, Ryu gives him another bag of coins, and the man agrees to tell Ryu everything. In the Dark Guild, they say every elf is followed by a spirit, and the elf is treated as a welcome bonus, so Ryu asks about that bonus and wonders what it means. The man asks about you if he knows the ruler is ill right now, so everyone is now trying to sign a contract with the spirit, and they need elves. The spirits usually stay close to the elves. After hearing all this, the main character said he understood everything. Ryu recalls the elf, saying their brothers and sisters are still suffering terribly and have asked the young man to help. Looking at the man, he thinks the elves' hearts are breaking now, and they have launched a spirit hunt, treating elves like objects. Ryu was furious, and Karine even noticed, saying Dad was very angry while Orica said she felt bloodlust. The man asks Ryu if he can do anything else to help. Ryu says no, that will be enough. He also asked if he could find out who was behind it, and the man apologized, saying he did not have that information. Ryu thanked the man for the information and said they thought it was time to leave. They promised to buy a servant from him next time. The man thanked them and said he looked forward to their next visit. After a while, Lear said she couldn't believe elves were being kidnapped just for money, and Karine called it terrible to see in person. Then Lear asked Ryu if the young man was okay, and he said he was fine. He insisted they would definitely save all the elves, added that he could not understand treating other races as objects, and Lear and Karen agreed with the young man. Ryu says more information is needed. We must find out where the prisoners are being held and who is behind this. Ms. Tiamat told the children to change because their clothes made them too noticeable now. Ryu agreed with the girl. They then decided to hide the clothes here. The main character says after that they need to ask more questions, then opens a pot on the ground and is very surprised by what he finds inside. Inside, a child giggled nervously and greeted Ryu, and everyone was very surprised. A child greeted Ryu. Ryu took the pot's lid and closed it. The child screamed and demanded to know what the young man was doing, and he apologized, saying he did not intend to invade the child's home. Alice said this was not her house and that she was not a child, and she is turning 19 this year and is an informant from the land of the world. Alice warned the young man not to underestimate her. Ryu said he looked like a child. Ryu then asked about the Land of Light and said it was his home. Alice looked surprised and asked whether he was really from there too. Ms. Tiamat asked about the Land of Light and whether the church really dominates that country. Oka asked about the church. Ryu said this is where they train for their profession, a large organization of priests. Alice said everything was right, so she came here to serve their hero. Ryu looked surprised and asked whether they really knew Chikaya. Alice confirmed she belonged to the heroes and worked in intelligence and information gathering, though her squad was a little different from the other heroes. Because they're from the same city, she asks the young man if he can help with a case, and Ryu asks what that means. The girl says the trade in prohibited goods is booming in this country and must be stopped. Ryu realizes Alice shares their goal. Alice said she already knows everything about how they came to the city to rescue the servants. They posed as rich people and infiltrated a dealer in prohibited goods. Offering a lot of useful information, she asks what they think, whether they will help free the servants and requests their response. Rue thinks for a moment, then asks the girl to let him find out why they are. Given Alice works in the intelligence group, it is puzzling that they do not release the servants themselves, and she said she could get information easily but could not fight. Thrown out when she tried to enter the auction, she followed Rue's suggestion and asked Poff for help, and Alice agreed, saying excessive spirit hunting is a serious problem. Elemental magic comes from spirits because long ago people made a contract with the King of Spirits, who granted the magic. After that outburst, he can end the fight. They may then lose their magic and have to face the monsters alone. Ryu thinks the hero may lose his powers too. Rushing to Rue, Alice pleaded for his help, promising to repay him and insisting she had to finish the mission. She warned he would not be able to face the hero if he failed, and Rue agreed that they would help. Lear said the hero hates monsters, and it's okay that they will help. Deciding it's better not to approach the hero yet, Ryu invites Lear to talk to gather useful information. Alice appears to be in a different squad than the hero. Her information could help them avoid the hero's attention. Tiamat said it would be better this way, and he says that means everything is decided. Rue says they will help, and in return the girl will share the information they want. Alice asked whether that was true, thanked the young man, and said she would contact the squad. The girl fell silent. Karin asked what she was doing. Ryu said it was a magical artifact. It works much like their connection. Alice says she has permission, asks everyone to speak inside the room, and the girl calls for everyone to follow her. When she trips and falls, Ryu doubts she's really from the scouting squad. After a while they came back, and Alice told the captain she was back, and the man said they had been waiting for them. Another group met the Ryu's group. The man thanked them for helping Alice.